you. I do have the same breath though.
You have good style.
All right, ready to go.
Yes, but just our internet connection is unstable.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know what's going on.
All right. Kicking this off. Welcome to the select board meeting for Monday, November 21st. All right, we will start with points of pride.
Sure. I have a couple. Officer Rush graduated from the Police Academy on Friday.
Ooh,
He was working today. By January, he has to do his field training here, but by January, he should be on his own. This was great. And Volnar, who had come from New York, needed to do the law package. He has passed that, so he is fully certified. So we're pretty close to being at full staff, which is just great.
Awesome.
And in your packets were, I think, 3 different letters that had been emails that had been sent from the county attorney's office, thanking the office of the officers for their work on cases that had come up. Sergeant O'Connor, Officer Daniels, and as well as Officer Rick Walter.
Nice.
yeah,
Is
those were great to see.
that it for you, Neil?
That's it.
Were you at the Kentucky Carry thing?
Well, not the
Oh,
wood.
The wood, sorry, the wood bank.
Yeah, the wood bank was, again, it was a very excellent turnout.
Mhm.
Must have been near 100 people, and it was great to see lots of young people there. And Mary Congorin does a great job of getting everybody and all the volunteers and all the wood. Bob LaPree's video of it. So, just thank everybody for it, and it's for a good cause.
Yeah.
And well, Neil mentioned about the police, both our current and former police chief were there, as well as, I believe, 1 or 2 other officers.
That's awesome. Great. Okay. Anyone else? Points of pride? Okay. The first step under administrative approval of the consent agenda.
We approve the consent agenda of November 21, 2022.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Approval of the public meeting minutes from November 14th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
All right, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right. So now work on the budget and warrant articles. First, we have the CIP update.
Sure, I can give you, I'll walk through the stuff you have. You have an updated tax rate sheet in front of you, which is even updated since Friday. We set the tax rate today. The town rate is 707, which is exactly what was presented at the town meeting. So that sheet is there, and based on that, we're able to update the fund balance reading, which is on the other side of that. The good news is that probably we have actually estimate at this point, which is a fairly conservative estimate, gives us quite a bit of fund balance that may be available to offset the taxes. The CIP committee ended up not meeting last week. They postponed. They're going to meet December 1st, which sort of puts it. That was the next time they were available this week. So, but what I can do is sort of highlight some of the things that are in the CIP plan that are probably the biggest changes. Even when they haven't finalized their recommendations. Uh, Sort of the first is sledge removal, which is on the second spreadsheet, large spreadsheet. We had been estimating for a number of years that sludge removal would be 200,000 done right around now. Because of PFAS, the new estimate is that that probably will be $1 million project. So basically the recommendation at this point is for sludge removal this year to take on our peer, put in to expend 100,000 on the engineering required for all of it. Just crazy. And then we would have a firm number and a firm plan with a plan to bond whatever that costs the next year for 20 years. And the numbers that are in here reflect the green numbers at the bottom of the income reflect the sewer users paying half the cost of this.
And Neil, if I remember from the other week, I had asked about the engineering in 2023, that 100,000, if any of that could be assigned to the TIF district, and the answer was no.
That's correct.
Okay. And with PFAS, aren't there isn't there some state money available for that?
There is, and we've got state money that has done, which we'll talk about next, the lagoons at the transfer station. We have gotten state money for the testing of that. And we certainly will keep looking for grants and get all the DES grants. Basically, DES is not really giving grants in this case for like sludge, but if you look further out, we did receive a grant for plant upgrades, which is actually a $3 million cost. We really need more information on that. So that's kind of put in here in 2025. And we received a 10% grant. Now it's great to receive a grant, but 10% of $3 million is not a huge, it's not significant. It's a significant amount of money, but not a significant offset to the total cost. So that is carried in here also at a 20-year bond, the upgrades with the users paying half. But I think that's still not firm enough. This sort of all happened later than we would have liked, and we need more information on what part of this has to be done, what doesn't have to be done, and the engineers are actually working on it. So, and also what was asked for was the pump up upgrade, which is $2 million. Seems like millions. And CIP has put that out past their 6-year lookout window as kind of a placeholder, knowing that can't be done until after some of these other things. But it may turn out that the point upgrades that have to be done are less, and that this could all be done. So a lot of that's placeholder, except for really the engineering costs that we have to do, really should do this year.
Can you remind me what's the status of looking at it, extending the sewer out to exit 6?
So at the bottom, which we'll get to at the end, that's a project that the engineering for that, it's been requested $35,000 for that, which would come from the TIF fund, because that is TIF related. So it's in there.
That project though is a ways from breaking ground.
What I'm thinking about is when that comes to play, then a fair portion of these costs are going to be going into the TIF district. And could we delay those costs until TIF district has sewer there?
They're different costs. The sludge, you may have a better idea a year from now when you're looking at potential upgrades, how much of that could relate to it. But the sludge removal is from the last 20 years. I don't think you can really put sludge into the TIF.
There's no firm time frame on the sewer expansion to exit 6.
Mhm.
I mean, getting the engineering redone because I think the last numbers were from years ago.
It was 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah. So even with firm numbers, I mean, that project, I don't think we've talked about it is actually happening.
Okay, and I'm just looking at 2029, say.
Yeah.
It's a big, $2 million or whatever. For a pump station. Could that be a goal?
That may be something that doesn't even happen. That's the placeholder. Best estimate now. So I wouldn't worry too much about 2029.
I wasn't worrying about it. I was thinking, is it, it sounds like, assuming we go along with the 100,000 here, that we've got another year at least to think about those, the next steps. Okay.
We really have good numbers.
We'll hold you to good numbers.
Better numbers.
Those are accurate numbers. Let me rephrase that. I don't think they're going to be good. And then the next thing I just wanted to note on the last page of CIP footprint is other capital projects.
Wait, sorry, can I just ask a couple more questions about the sludge removal?
Sure.
The line that paid by user fees, is those line item numbers, is that the total amount of income from user fees, or is that just the amount of user fees that are going towards the CRF?
That assumes they're paying 50%.
50% of the bond.
Of the bond.
Right. No, right. So, but 50% of the bond is $30,000, but the paid by user fees is, it varies over time, but 50% of the bond is like in the order of $30,000 to $50,000, and the paid by user fees number is like in the hundreds, 200s.
Yeah.
So
actually, if you look at the sludge removal bond and the sewer plant bond in 2025,
those two add up to the thing.
to add up. to
Okay,
double
right.
the money.
So those two bonds. So, and then in normal operations, is it 100% funded by user fees, or like is normal operations also 50-50?
Normal operations is 100%
100%.
by the operating budget is 100%.
So in this case, it's just that the amount is way too much to be covered by user fees.
Yeah, and until the board raised the user fees last year, all the capital costs were coming out of the town.
And Thomas, we've talked about this, in the past, and my understanding is when the system was first built, it was built for larger than the number of customers we have for future expansion, and that was sort of the rationale why the current users should only pay something less than 100% of capital costs. And, that sort of goes into why I was asking about the TIF district, is if that was connected, then we could, I think, legitimately say, well, 100% of the capital cost should be paid by users.
My understanding is it was designed to be built in 3 phases, and only the first phase was done. And it was done kind of under duress because the pipes were running into the river and the time period came. So phase 1 was done, but the rest wasn't, which makes it much harder to operate, pay for a third of probably the customers that it would be great to have one.
Cool. Sorry, yeah, that was the only question. Thanks. Appreciate it.
And then- So next one is Captain Lagoon closing. We're still waiting for the PFAS results, but our assumption is that there is PFAS in there and that will need to be capped and closed. And the estimate from the engineers on that is seems like we used to got $100,000. So the numbers in here reflect really getting a 1 million. 25% of which Webster pays. So that's what's in here. That's the cap that close up. And then down at the bottom of this page, better things to note. Sewer expansion engineering is requested at 35. That can be paid by the TIF district. The solar at the wastewater treatment plant is estimated at 250. We have a grant for that to cover the entire cost of that. And we've also received a grant for the wastewater asset management. That's a DS fund, so that we know exactly what we have and they pay for that. So those are the good things. And the rest of the CIP is largely exactly as it has been, except it's been affected by the rise in costs.
So Neil, if I just looked at potential bonds, this would have 1 million, or what's going to be higher than 1 million bond for Briar Hill in 2023.
That is, as of right now, that's not in there as a bond, it's in there as a full cost.
Okay. Fair enough.
That's the 1.3.
1.3, which is in as a road project.
Oh, the warrant article.
Yeah, so of the 1.2 increase, 1.3 is. So if you take that out.
I hate to be out of line, but there's no way we can support a 35% increase.
No.
Wait, for what?
This is just,
Oh, thanks.
this is.
Yeah.
We're all thinking the same.
I'm not advocating that either. I'm just explaining where.
Yeah,
If you
that's,
take the 1.3 out and use fund balance, you get actually down to a
Zero.
pretty close.
okay, so if I put that one aside, then the other bonds that are projected in the CIP are in 2024, and it's $1 million for the transfer station lagoon and $1 million for sludge removal.
Actually, the transfer station would be 2023. Your first payments are in 2024. And then, yes, sludge removal in 2024. That's the way it's.
What's the overlay, 80,000, that's just an increase in the,
That is the amount we have to set aside like for abatements and
oh,
all
okay.
that. And it's dropping from the 130 to the 80 because we no longer have we did half the PSNH Eversource last year.
Yep.
So
Okay.
it dropped the 6 million.
I think I asked this question last time, but I forget the pay by bag special revenue is gone.
It's just not in here. It's because it's a different fund, it offsets itself. So.
No, right, but it comes out, I mean, it's a wash, but in terms of the percentage, the bottom.
Yeah, we will fill that in.
So-
It will be a revenue and an expense which balances each other out.
But in terms of total difference from 2022, it comes out.
Yes. But not on the grand total line.
It doesn't come out of the grand total line?
No, because the grand total is the amount raised by taxes, so.
Okay.
So it's a wash in that way.
So any specific questions about items in this, we should hold off till next week?
I can answer, depending on what they are, I can answer them.
I had asked Donna about the air conditioning units at the library replacement systems, it's line 28. And where she indicated it was 2 units, yes, the smaller one that maybe go to mini splits, if that might be cheaper on
She was going to check on that.
that. Okay.
I haven't got any information back. But given, it might, the small.
I'm also thinking it might be more energy efficient.
I think the issue is that that's a cycle system. And putting mini splits in means you have to take part of the existing system offline.
Yeah, I just throwing out a thought. Under cemetery maintenance, line 140. Do we ever touch that? Have we ever touched that?
Cemetery maintenance.
Yes.
Yes. So the history behind that is there used to be capital reserves funds for each cemetery that were to expand, or maybe 3 of them. And so those were eliminated and all the funds were put into one. And this year, actually, I think it's been planned that you approved what was it, a $9,000 or $10,000 upgrade to the shed. So yes, it has been.
Okay. And on the town facilities maintenance trust, police station roof, last year, the estimate was, I believe, 45,000, now it's 80. Is that simply inflation on roofs, or is it more to do?
My understanding is that's largely inflation. I believe that's for a metal roof. But I think last year's number was too, but I can check on that.
And in that same section, the Slusher Center air conditioning R22 units, again, are mini splits, more economical option.
Like that, but I doubt it because you're talking different rooms and different.
And we had some discussion, let's say, about the skate park, and there's 9,000 in there for repairs and signage. It's still appropriate to keep the 9,000.
So what that is that the study that she talked about. skate park. Not planning to do, it's that.
Just to back up for a second, can we ask for a price on a shingle roof versus a metal roof?
Yeah.
Because that'll last 30 years and I'll be done.
Yeah, me too.
Nice.
I'm a realist.
Me too.
I mean, we just,
I mean, I hope Thomas will be the only.
I mean, yeah, but I'm
Yeah, you
still,
guys will still be.
I'm still all wrestling.
Tired.
Fun time.
Neil, what's the former rescue building, 35,000?
So that is for a roof and siding, or that is re-screwing in, all the things are coming out of the metal roof, that's re-screwing that and fixing the side.
Is there siding? I thought that was a concrete block building.
No, it has,
Oh.
it matches Chuck's garage,
Okay.
it's vinyl siding.
Got it.
It does have a better roof.
35 grand. Damn.
There, if the CIP is not meeting until the 1st, and we have to present to budget committee on the 7th.
So they have really made all their recommendations on everything except kind of these big things, and your input is probably as important, probably more important than theirs on that. I don't think they'll make major.
Keep the 6th open so that you and I can spend the day getting everything organized for the 7th.
Any more CIP?
Is our goal now to modify this or change it or comment on it, or is this just gather information and we're discussing it later, or
This is where you
got it?
don't have to meet next week if you finalize your budget to know.
Let's do it.
Does that sound?
Incentives.
One option might be, though, realistically, it might put a crunch on, but if CIP is meeting the 1st, it might not be worth meeting next week and meet the 5th, which is already kind of scheduled, I think it's in their schedule,
Oh, yeah.
to finalize it.
Mhm.
That does. It's done before. then better.
Well, that's if we can finalize the operating budget tonight and the
Right.
revenue tonight.
All right.
Can we bond stuff over 5 years?
Yes.
And I think that we should pay 300,000 of this road project this year out of cash. We should bond $1 million and pay it over 5 years.
I would,
Keeps the number about the same, 300,000 years for the next 5 years. 4 years, I prefer 4 years, sorry, but 5 years is fine.
When we've had road bonds in the past, we haven't really specified what specific roads. And,
Yes, we have.
there've been a number of those. It wasn't just for one road.
Correct. But that's because it was going to more than one road.
Right, and here, if it's 1.3 million for Briar Hill, and that's only a third of what has to be done on Briar Hill, I wonder if that would even pass.
well, I'm wondering if it ever makes sense to bond road projects. If we know that the amount of money that we're putting into road maintenance is way underfunded. The amount that we the amount that we should be spending every year should almost match the amount that we'd be spending on bonds anyways. So why not just spend that much every year? If we have 50 miles of paved road. And a mile needs to get paved every year. That's $1 million.
It's more than that.
More than,
Dan said this is just the base code.
right. So why bond it if we're like, if we know that next year we'll have to bond another 1.5, and the next year we'll have to bond another 1.5. Why bond it if we're going to constantly do it?
All I can tell you is 35%.
No, I know.
But
But what about instead say, don't do the bond or don't do the road project this year, but like put that portion into the capital reserve fund, because right now in the reserve fund, there's nothing there. Move those numbers up. So we are now starting to put money into the capital reserve fund, not the whole, the whole 750, but hold off that project 1 year, but over the course of 3 to 4 years, increase the amount that's going into the CRF to what it should be. And then we'd be at a point where we're properly funding the roads.
I don't think we can make that number work.
But see, I'm saying that you have to make that number work eventually, or the roads fall apart. So like, we're gonna.
That was falling apart now. That's why I didn't.
No, I know, but like, the budget either has to get to a place where we are properly funding the roads, or the roads will fall apart.
Road maintenance is underfunded. This is where we come to every year. What level of increase can we support? And that's the catch-22. I mean, if you want to present the budget with a 50% increase, you are certainly welcome to take the helm in March. Can we be thrilled to have you make that argument?
And we're supposed to be doing 6 miles every year, not 1.
Well, it's
Paving, not rebuilding.
paving and rebuilding. Rebuilding happens,
In Briar Hills are rebuilding.
yeah. I mean, there's like a bunch of different models for how you can structure the maintenance cycle.
It depends on the.
Depends on the road and depends on how you do the.
They did that wonderful chip seal on my road. It's very inexpensive.
Right. We could just make them all paved for gravel roads. There's
True.
They pave all the plastic.
That
It's
is,
online.
gravel roads are more expensive in lots of cases. Depending on the traffic, yeah.
They need constant attention. They need to be graded 2-3 times a year.
And that's not a suggestion that we pave any current gravel. It's just to be clear.
No, I just said to pave every single class. Who's online? Somebody's gonna vote me. It was sarcasm.
I wonder if we should just leave the road issue for last, try to resolve everything else, see where we are percentage wise and all.
It's 70% of the increase. It is the driver of the budget increase.
Rather than, I don't know if this is any better, but you can do an appropriation and have it go for not more than 5 years. And it needs a supermajority. It's basically like a bond, but we're not paying interest for a bond. And you can do it for less than 5 years. So for the road project, we can go to town meeting and say, over the next however many years, this is the gross amount we want to spend. This is what we're going to spend in each of those years. And we don't have to borrow the money to do it. It has to come out of, the taxpayer directly, but you can raise a significant sum of money without having to pay interest.
I think that's like an interesting option, but the thing that I'm worried about is what we're saying with this is this specific road is bad enough that we're going to deal with it. But we know that all the other roads are going to need the same thing as soon as it becomes bad enough. So like,
Well, when is bad? That's the question, right? This is a once in a 25 years project.
right, but then there's going to be another road that's going to be a once in a 25-year project. It's like that's like that you doing that process and saying, okay, we'll do it for 5 years. Like in reality, we shouldn't be just doing it for 5 years. We should be doing it forever. And we're just saying the excuse right now is because this road is bad enough that we all want to deal with it.
Well, you can also, if we bond it, you can spread out the impact to the taxpayers.
Right, but he's saying you're gonna have to do another bond next year.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And we're just waiting until something becomes horrific enough that we're okay dealing with it, as opposed to properly funding it in the first place. And if we properly fund it in the first place, the eventual impact costs will be low. Like if we.
Yeah.
Like I would be more in favor of saying, like, let's hold off on this one, not do that project, but take that increase over 3 years to then be at a stable point and keep that increase then forever.
So you want to increase the Shinny pay budget from 410,000 roughly to 810,000, 850,000.
Yes. And then also put money into the Sierra.
You can't have both.
Why not?
It's too much money.
Okay, no, because I'm going from
Yeah.
one, no, because I'm going
It
from
is.
one, take the 4, add another 3, that's 7, that's $300,000 less than this.
Thomas, what could you live with for a tax rate increase?
I don't know, I mean, you mean I think
Realistically,
baseline, I think-
5%, 10%,
baseline, I
20%?
think we need to, at the bare minimum, be coming in around 6 to 7%. If we're less than 6 to 7%, we are paying for less stuff than we did last year.
So
That is,
you're saying, let's try to create a budget that comes out to say 7% increase.
I think I think we should be doing our best to come up with a good budget, and we should not be spending money we don't need to spend. But I think that if the budget is less than 7%, then somehow we found a way to buy less stuff. We are paying for less things than we did last year.
We've got a fund balance. It's going to help us in one way or another.
Right.
And, whether we want to attribute a lot of that fund balance to be used for roads either now or in the future might be one way to do that. And that's sort of why I was saying, can we try to deal with everything else first? We say, okay, with everything else, we're at 6.5% without touching the fund balance, and then we can decide about fund balance.
Yes.
I think rightly or wrongly, it's harder to get the voters to support what you're suggesting. I think that they'll be more inclined to say, this is a dire need and we need to fix it, than we've been underfunding it for years and the roads are suffering and we need to drastically increase the operating budget, which is, we're just going to have to do basically in perpetuity to get back to where we need to go.
So I agree with you, but if you get past the first year, then that's the budget, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, yeah, you're right. It is the budget after that first year.
Past the first year.
Just, yeah.
And, what's our tax rate going to be? How much of an increase? I feel Dan's pain. I mean, he's got a shitty job, sorry. He's got a crappy job trying to manage the roads and the plowing and all the other stuff that he has to deal with. We have a crappy job in trying to make sure that the taxpayers don't revolt.
Yeah.
And, that's the sort of catch-22 that we're in. I agree the roads are underfunded. When Dan was here, it's very clear we're underwater on the roads. I don't know well enough, but I know because I drive it. I know what Ride Hill's like. I don't know if it can last another year or two without someone getting hurt. That's always a concern. Yeah, I'd love to see us punch the budget up to be able to do more paving. There's the tax rate issue is not insignificant. That's crazy to say this one's urgent, we got to do it now. And then have to do, I don't know, what whatever, Park Avenue. Well, that's a state road, never mind. All of Kearsarge. 3 or 4 years later. That's,
There's always gonna be another one.
well, yeah, there is. I mean, we're never gonna be. And if we have to spend another $1.5 million to do a top coat on Friar Hill after we do this. Because you can't just leave the base coat there, because the stones are too big and the water gets in, it'll just heave. So that, I mean, yeah, I mean, we're already underwater for next year. If we do this project now. Friar Hill's really a $3 million reconstruction.
For a third,
Yeah.
for a third of the road.
It's $1 million, it's $1 million for,
Well, if you include the top coat though, in a year, 2 years. Yeah. Or for the whole thing, yeah.
So one of the big problems with the road is we don't have like a viable model for what the cost would be over time. We don't have in front of us, starting from here over the course of 5 years, this is how much, like we starting with Briar Hill as the example, tear it up now, in 5 years, we spend this much doing a top coat, in 10 years, 15 years, we're going to ship and pay this much, and then 25 years, do the whole cycle. We don't have that breakdown. So we don't know, we don't have a way of saying, this is how much money we should be spending on the roads. We just know it's not.
and it's super unpredictable with,
That's part of
weather
it.
and-
Like Pine Street gets tremendous truck traffic. That's not gonna last as long as Friar Hill. Friar Hill doesn't have truck.
But that should shake out in the average. I mean, like, we have some that are heavily trafficked, some that are less trafficked, so some will have to be faster, some will be slower. That shakes out just because we have a lot of roads. But we don't have like a,
Well, Dan said he has a model on his computer of life cycle costs for roads.
Right.
So we do have it. We don't have it, but Dan has it.
The cost, depending on which method you use.
right, but what I'm saying is that for what we're discussing as to whether or not we should be doing one thing or another thing, that end number that we come up with matters. Like whether or not it's increasing the shipping and paving from 400 to 800, or whether it's decreasing it to 1.2, that's like, that matters a lot for what we would be deciding to.
But unless you're gonna do $2 million a year, you're not gonna catch up on the roads.
What if it was only one?
There's only one.
You're saying two, what if it was only one? What if it actually shook out to be 1 million?
You're still not gonna catch up.
What if we would catch up at one?
Well,
Then would
Dan
we
has
just
said
increase the
that we
budget?
won't.
so I feel like maybe we should take Ken's approach or a different approach, because we could go, this is like philosophical about roads, and I know we have to have the conversation, but I do feel like we're not making any actual progress right now, so do we want to take a different approach here, like Ken's suggestion to try to go through? Not that it's not important, I just feel like we keep going and going and going with this.
Right. I'm fine going a different way.
Okay,
What
stop.
I'm afraid of is that if we go through everything and we come up with, okay, this number is great, then we're, okay, now what do we do? And it's like, nothing will happen with the roads because it's not in a warrant article, it's not in a budget item, it's just we're happy with the budget now, let's not increase it to fix the roads.
I was just saying, let's deal with everything else and deal with that last. And we have to take it, at that point, it's easier to take into account, what do we think the voters will accept? What can they live with?
Yeah. I think we still have to deal with it, obviously, but it feels like endless task right now, trying to nail down our approach to roads to start. All right. Do we want to take that approach, start diving in on other non-road issues?
Just on the CIP portion, what I had for notes that you're gonna get some more information on, Neil, was relating to the police station, mini splits at the Slusher and the library, and the study at the skate park.
What was your question on the study of the skate park?
If that's necessary at this point or not.
That's sort of your decision. You heard that presented.
Yeah, what was, I'm trying to remember what exactly.
That
it was.
was, so the proposal is to do,
Concrete ramps. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a sort of almost a design study
right,
as to what the layout would be and what the cost would be to actually build the concrete ramps.
So Jeff, you're thinking we should just include this?
I mean, I can only tell you what I heard when Paula spoke, which was the frames are going bad, which means at some point, something's gonna fail. And it's likely someone will get hurt. It's one thing to ride a skateboard up a ramp that's solid, but if it's not solid when you go up it, that's a bit hazardous.
So we can't do like the piecemeal, like putting on new sheets because I think that's what Paul was, or we could, but it doesn't
we
really.
have to really rebuild the frames. There's nothing we'll have to screw the
Okay.
skate rink into. It's getting.
Is the concrete approach, does that mean we like go over what exists or is it like basically a rebuild?
Rebuild.
Brandon,
So I guess we have to sort of decide if we, it seems,
Sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, to me, it feels like it's conceptually, if we feel like we're in support of keeping the skate park
yeah,
for a long
that's-
time, then this is the next step.
Right.
If we're conceptually not in favor of maintaining the skate park, then we should not
You
do
should
it.
just take it all out.
Just take it all out.
Mhm.
Okay, well, with that discussion, I guess I'm fine with just leaving it in.
Just before we leave, and Neil, were you also gonna look at a price for shingles for the police station rather than metal?
Yes,
roofs?
shingles.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I do have that.
What do you have for us?
So with
Ken?
that, I guess,
Tell me where you want to go, because
okay,
I'm
sure,
two
yeah,
different spreadsheets.
okay. I was gonna go to the operating budget, as you provided the updates on Friday. My first question is on 4152, the reval. Did you find out anything more about the professional services and Sam Susie's contract?
That is the correct.
But do we need that? Do we need that?
Assess utilities and cell towers, yes.
For, let's see, 4191, for planning for professional services. Have a note that you're going to be proposing to encumber some money at the end of the year.
I think there was that discussion. For scanning of records.
Mhm. Okay. So if you're encumbering, then that, okay. I, just for everybody's benefit, I don't have many. I think that our department heads and Neil have done a great job. Fire 4220. For 4220, 120 part-time call fire wage. We were holding the budget at the same amount. I thought Chief EL had indicated that he's, definitely low on getting call people, and with that in mind, is is 35,000 still reasonable, or could we cut it to 30 and it wouldn't have any impact at all on his recruiting?
Well, I know you can.
The bottom of page 26.
I'm on page 30,
Oh, okay, I'm using the old,
the old book.
yes.
You know, it gets really. Sorry.
I just made
Different
changes
versions.
because I had too many notes.
What's the line number? I haven't.
It's 4220 fire, count 120.
Thanks.
Part-time call fire wages. The budget for 2022 was 35, that
Mhm.
was proposed for 23. And the year-to-date is only 9,300.
Mhm.
And based on Chief's comment, that it sounded like we could reduce the 35.
Mhm. You mean to 30?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So I know the training had been going on this much, and that's some of it, that has started back up.
I don't recall the conversation with the chief on this particular line item. Did he say that? Did we ask him about what a potential reduction would do on this one?
Didn't ask that, asked about what he was doing in terms of having, call people.
Okay.
And it was, let's say lower than he'd like, and wasn't having great success.
Okay, okay.
You want to resolve this one, or should I move on?
So, I mean, it looks like, so they were at 21 and 16 the last 2 years, but Neil, are you saying that?
Some of them is because there was not training going on during COVID.
But they're only at 9 now. Although I can't remember what his numbers
That
are.
would be half a year probably.
I don't have an objection to going down to 30.
I agree.
Okay, so move on.
Gotta start somewhere.
My name's there.
Let's start and end there.
Okay, I will skip over communicating.
So I think what's in there is the percent after your discussion last meeting, just so.
No, I thought it was a lot more.
Eight percent is in there.
Well, we weren't going to touch that yet anyway. Yeah. Recreation was the next.
Mhm.
45, 20, count 45, 20.
Page,
Using the old book. or
the old
new
book, the old book, yeah,
The old book.
75.
36,
Oh, you're,
Got six. Count 20.
36.
oh my God.
Yeah, it's 30, yeah, my comment is on 30, 37. First was, on page 37 of the old book, breakfast for postage. About 2/3 of the way down, that one, I thought we could reduce to 500.
Given the fact that we put off the discussion on the roads, probably not the time for philosophical discussion of whether to keep the pond open. But it's an ongoing problem.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
The problem is just being able to staff it, or, yeah.
Yeah. For 30 grand or whatever. Yeah, 30 grand.
Did you want to talk about that or
Well-
just move on? Okay, so we okay on reducing postage by 250?
I'm fine with
I think
that.
so.
Okay. Then just 3 down, 680 special events,
Mm-hmm.
which is a new one.
Yeah.
I certainly heard and took to heart what Louise had said when she called in. So I was thinking we should put something, keep something in there, but not the 5,000.
Yeah.
I'll leave it to somebody else to suggest the alternative number.
Well, yeah, this was one I had thought of too, because it's not entirely clear to me, like why we would change what we've been doing on that front. And in a year like this, having like a new item for 5 grand for events seems undoable, I guess, or unreasonable. I mean, I would say 0 personally. But maybe that's too harsh.
Was Louise complaining about this one, or was she complaining about the economic development one? I think it was the economic development.
Well,
Yeah.
more economic development, but both.
This is,
They connected.
he's on the recreation committee. She,
Yeah.
I would guess she supports this 5 grand.
Oh, absolutely, she supports this one.
Hasn't been spent the last 2 years, 3 years?
We haven't.
Well, we haven't had it.
Hasn't been, okay.
Yeah.
Got it, right, okay.
Mhm.
And I think I understand the desire to reduce it, but I guess I don't know if I could eliminate it altogether. Which I guess gets us right back to what Ken was without saying a number.
Can't put that in the budget.
No, it doesn't show up in those little cells.
You know, we could move this 1,500 and take 1,500 away from economic development. That would reduce the total by 5 grand.
I guess it doesn't seem like we have a ton of events in this town, first of all, which is wonderful. But I think if you have to pay a nominal fee, or if some are like donations encouraged, like, I guess I'm just not clear on like what this truly gets the town. I mean, I don't see us actually like losing anything if we take this out. Like, it doesn't seem like completely essential, like tied to some essential event, I guess is my point. I mean, I get it conceptually, but in a year like this, it feels like a tough thing for us to include.
It's also related to how much fundraising they do. Like, they bring significant money in for 4th of July and some of them, so I think.
For good causes. Is that what you're talking about? They're like, they don't pay for themselves, the events, or
They have to fundraise through it.
to fund the event, right?
Jeff is indicating two.
Move it to 2. We'll see what they do with it this year.
Is that acceptable? Yes?
Sure.
Okay.
Might not be the last we hear from this her, so.
I think it's reasonable. It's the first time. So let's see what it means. My next one was economic development 4652. On the old book, it's page 40. And almost, I think I'd call it housekeeping for and I think we talked about it, the economic development director salary is split 50% with the tip. So should Social Security and Medicare be similarly split?
You know, if there's some like HR reason or some. reason-
Yeah, I think probably what we really should do is bring the entire cost into this budget and have an offsetting revenue.
From the TIF.
Yeah, I think that would be the cleanest, most transparent way.
Can we just eliminate it?
That's your call. I'm just
Asked several
I'm
times,
asking-
and I haven't gotten an answer as to what the heck she does in terms of economic development.
You've asked-
Ken asked her, all she could talk about was grants, and they weren't economic development grants.
I-
She's doing the grant for the solar at the wastewater treatment plant. That's not her job. I'm sorry, but it's not. Her job is to talk to our major employers, keep them here in town, find out if they need help expanding. I asked you personally.
Yeah.
What of the top 10 or 20 employers has she talked to? You couldn't answer.
So I think if we're talking about like a specific employee's job parameters, I don't think it's appropriate to do it right here,
I would
or like
agree.
job performance.
If we're gonna talk about her job performance, I think it should be non-public, but if we're gonna talk about the scope of the
I'm
EDC,
referring to what she said in the public session on her budget. Ken asked her what she'd done, and she stated grants.
yeah,
I had similarly asked her to follow up with anything else. And I haven't, heard anything yet. So, I'm just, waiting on that.
not making this about her job performance. And what I've mentioned to you is that, the EDC thinks of economic development in broader terms than I think you're speaking of right now. And so, yes, she does have as one of her tasks to get in touch with the current businesses, the major employers in town, and have a dialogue with them about, what issues they're seeing and what they could need. That is not as simple as it may seem. And there's a good bit of work that has to happen before she reaches out to them.
I would disagree.
Understood. And some of these grants, there's a lot of money that's available right now because of the federal funds that are there. And
I agree, there's a lot of money available.
And I know that, you think it may not be her role to seek those grants.
The precinct. There.
But, those grant funds are not going to be available. There's a limited window to try to access those funds.
In the context that you're speaking about, we should eliminate this position and create a community development position.
So
That's been the primary focus since this position was created.
I disagree. Again, I think that when I'm saying we, the EDC thinks of economic development in broader terms. And, you know,
How is a solar grant at the wastewater treatment plant related to economic development?
I mean, that is so if that project, well, it prevents that project from hitting the tax rate. And so it defrays the cost from hitting the taxpayer. And I think it brings down the operating cost. You're not paying for electricity going forward as a result of that. And so in that sense, you have funding you can spend on other projects around town.
Again, I disagree, but
Would you want to fund a community development director?
I'm just saying that seems to be the tasks that are being accomplished.
So it sounds like that would be an argument for a title change, not necessarily for eliminating the position.
Is there someone more qualified to be doing grant writing?
So it seems like unless you want to talk about eliminating the position, I'm not sure it makes sense to discuss like who's doing what grants or like what the parameters of this role are right now in this setting. That doesn't seem appropriate to me, but like, I'm not sure how this is helpful to figuring out economic development budget.
I think it started with my asking for what accomplishments of the department had been, so I could use that to defend and attack, whether it's a budget committee or whatever, that this is things that the department has accomplished for us.
Mhm.
That was the whole intent of why I was asking.
Right, and that's fair, but in terms of the actual budget and like the salary, unless we want to talk about whether or not the position itself should be eliminated or like cut down, this seems like a pretty straightforward.
If it were a community development position, would it be eligible for 50% funding from the TIF?
It would have to do work for the TIF or in the TIF. Any position with any title could be if it met criteria. It's hard to say, just kind of in general.
So it seems like, I mean, my opinion on this is we take the approach Neil said, if that makes sense, if we can do offsetting revenue from the TIF. I think if we want to have a bigger picture discussion about like the job requirements under this title, we can do that, but I don't necessarily want to do it right now. I also think you're talking about,
Should do
okay, fair, good. All right, so do we want to try to do this approach of offsetting?
I think bottom line, it makes sense to
Yeah.
the taxpayers in town.
So we'll put the whole everything in here and we'll add a line for TIF revenue from the TIF fund.
And that'll include the wages and the retirement and
Yeah.
the FICA. And
Yeah.
That
Very
makes
good.
sense.
The other item I had here is, and I'm just going to throw it out, is again, let's call it Louise's point about the community relations and outreach, the 1,500, out of which money would be going to Starry Night or whatever.
As an example, yeah. I mean, I'd like that money to stay in there. I mean, I can tell you that there are 2 members on the EDC who are active in the chamber, and they think highly of the role of this money in their work to promote the businesses that are in town.
Can you remind me, Stephen, the difference between this and the 1,500 for professional service?
Yeah, that's for like, the 1,500 was for like, if there is a grant opportunity and it requires some sort of a survey or a match, so that there'd be a line item and some funds specific to that purpose.
So were you suggesting, Ken, to cut
I was,
outreach?
I knew it was an item that we had discussion about, so I just wanted to
Mhm.
flag it for further discussion. If you want, I'd say the maximum amount in discussion might be $500. I don't know if it's worth having maybe a discussion about.
It looks like 1,000 is what has been spent the last couple of years. You want to drop it to 500 or 1,000? We can debate that.
I'll suggest dropping it from 1,500 to 1,000.
Do you think that'll have a material adverse impact? See, looks like 1,000 is what has been the last couple of years.
I think it will tie the hands of the committee for what sort of events can be promoted. Even if it is level with what has been spent previously. For this particular part of the operating budget, I feel like I'm advocating for the committee, so I, leave it to you guys to make the decision about what this number should be. Again, my understanding from speaking with the members of the committee that are part of the chamber, and hearing them talk about the other businesses in town that have benefited from this, it's really helpful to be able to have this money to promote these events. In light of the budget environment we're in, bumping it up is not feasible, then so be it. But this is money that I expect will be spent if it's approved by the voters.
Okay. Do either of you have an opinion on 1,500 versus 1,000? I would say, not to sound harsh, we should go down to 1,000, given the environment, unless one of you has a problem with that. I think that's what we'll do.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
One of the new items, Neil, is the debt related to the Houston barn, and when do you expect to issue the bond, and what interest rate are you assuming?
So that should be issued anytime, and I believe it's at 4.25.
And is that through the municipal bond bank?
That is not through Bank Savings is the one that came in with the lowest rate.
Where are you looking for that, Kim?
What did we,
It came up.
what did we expect that rate was gonna be last year, 2.7?
Yeah, that would
It's gonna be
much lower.
definitely the same number this year. Can I ask a similar question on the bond, on the barn bond? On the tax rate estimation? The sheet,
Yeah,
there's bond through a barn bond through the pass-through revenue. And then there's also, so there's the warrant article, barn bond, 272,000.
Okay, thank you.
And then there's also pass-through revenue, barn bond, 200,000.
correct. Because last year the bond was approved. It was appropriated. But then you receive the revenue, because you're not raising taxes on that, so it is offset. The bond, the revenue from the bond is considered.
So we vote to appropriate it,
Yeah,
and then we get the money from the bond bank that offsets it.
yes.
But
And
where,
then the operating budget are the payments.
And we didn't make any payments last year, so it
To
necessarily.
say you were doing the $3.5 million bond, if you don't show that as you appropriate that, it passes a town meeting. If you don't show that as revenue, then you're raising the amount you collect by taxes by 3.5 million, which doesn't.
but the debt service for that bond isn't in here.
It is
It is?
in the opinion.
Yeah, page.
Oh, the updated one.
In the-
Not in the old book.
In the
That's what I-
update, it's on
I
page
don't fit the new one.
45. I'm bouncing back and forth now.
The, what was sent out Friday, it's definitely
Okay. Well, I can't see it.
switching accounting system, some things didn't carry the way they were
I got it.
supposed to. Things we caught.
But in. So that. The bond payment should be in. This grand total operating expense.
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Wait,
The two that was in 23 payment is in.
so. Sorry,
That's all right.
when you look at. The percent increase. If you look at the expenses, operating budget expenses line. It's increasing by 7.15%. That includes
The
bond payments
Yes,
that were voted on last year.
yes.
So when we then look at warrant articles in terms of the amount, if you look at the total impact, the tax impact at the bottom. The increase includes the thing that was voted on as an increase from last year.
Correct.
Right, so this 34.63% increase in the tax, well, the 35.25% grand total increase. If you were to say this is the amount that you're voting on for your increase, it shouldn't include that bond payment. Because that was voted on last year.
Except you have to appropriate the money to pay it.
No, I know, but so like if you're saying bottom line, we're gonna vote for this increase, this percentage increase. That includes something that we already voted on last year.
No, we voted to issue the bond.
Right.
We didn't vote to pay it back last year.
That's the same thing.
Well, it's not the same thing.
It's the same
In terms of the town budget, it's not the same.
No, I know the term.
You have to pay it
No,
back.
no, that's what I'm saying. That's my point though, right? So last year, everyone decided, yes, we are going to pay for this by getting a bond and we're gonna pay for it over time. We expect our taxes to increase, right? So in the same way that the road project is included in the increase.
No, that road project is all spent this year. It's not bonded.
Doesn't matter if it's bonded or not. It's amount to be spent. It's an amount, we're saying we're gonna increase by an amount to be spent. I'm just saying it's in there.
If
You budget your house payment every month?
My house payment isn't a government entity.
Yes, but the government accounting requires you to disclose. that
No,
you're paying
I,
back the debt.
I'm not saying the number's wrong. I'm not saying the number's wrong. I'm not saying the number's wrong. I'm just saying,
It's part of the budget that the voters have to approve.
I'm not, that's not what I'm saying. I agree with that. I get what you're saying. I agree with that. I'm just saying that if you then say there's a caveat in there, which is we've already agreed that this is going to increase by some amount. We've already said, like, if we did absolutely nothing, that number has to increase by the amount that we voted on last year, because we already decided we're going to increase our budget
We
by.
didn't know what the payment was last year.
That's fine, but we voted to do it. We have to do it.
Yes,
Yes.
we vote to have health insurance for our employees.
I don't understand.
It's a
So-
payment that we have to make. It has to be in the budget.
I agree.
Right, so Thomas, are you saying, to like dumb it down here, are you saying like conceptually? This chunk here is making the 35 seem as though this year that's like all new spending, when in fact
No, I'm not saying
the whole
I'm just,
presentation, like for
well,
example.
that's what I'm saying, is it like?
When
a
Warren
presentation?
presents, he's going to say the budget's up this much, but some of this is
we already said,
projects.
we already said.
Right. so
But you
you're
still
saying-
have to appropriate the money to pay.
But in terms of presenting it to voters, you're saying this is not necessarily super clear in terms, is that what you're trying to say?
I'm just trying to clarify for myself
Okay.
whether or not this number down here includes something that was voted on last year.
And it
And it
does,
does.
Yes.
right,
I'm not saying how we should present anything. I'm
Okay.
not saying we should or should not be doing it. I'm just trying to clarify. The number here is offset from you here for that reason. And then if you're gonna have bond payments that were voted on last year are gonna end up in this number, just
Yeah, and
how it ends up.
when I present the operating budget, it'll be explained that, part of it is $35,000 due to
Due to the bond,
the
right?
bond.
Totally. I'm not disagreeing with any of that stuff.
Okay,
Decided not to.
Yeah, sure,
Your
sure.
question.
my next and maybe last item was on the sewer fund. 4326. Account 460 sewer engineering. It's a $50,000 item. Can 25%, 25,000 be going to the TIF?
No, that has nothing to do with it. No.
Future expansion of the sewer system.
Yeah, it's the plan, not the expansion of the actual system.
So the TIF expansion doesn't necessarily require the plant to be upgraded or expanded.
I don't, that's correct.
Okay,
As of the information we had, that may change.
okay.
Okay, unfortunately, I didn't have any others in the operating expense category. I don't know if anybody else. does.
Yeah, I have a couple.
All right, let's hear it.
Under the ambulance, which is on page 25 of the old book. Line 120, ambulance wages, call, training and courses. Year to date's only $4,200, and the budget for next year is almost 13,000. And admittedly, there was COVID in 20 and 21. They've not spent anywhere near that amount of money.
On that, Jeff, I thought I asked the chief when he was in and he indicated, I thought he indicated that he basically expects to spend it all this year.
I don't recall hearing that, but I'm gonna take your word for it, Ken.
Well,
You're more in tune with the numbers than I am.
let's see, Neil, do you remember that?
I believe so. I think there's a couple of people in the forces right now that gets covered. But I can check on it.
And then conferences and training, the same thing, you know, year to date, they're at less than 1,200, get 5,000 budgeted.
The update, wait, are you on line 540?
Yep.
The
Ambulance?
update's 4,000 now for year to date,
Okay. Oh, it is?
Yes.
right? Yeah, I'm in the new book.
4,080.
I
Yeah.
don't have it.
No, it was in the old book,
Oh,
page 26.
27. Line,
you have the right year.
line 540.
Oh, we're, well, you guys are conflating ambulance and fire.
Year and fire.
I'm an ambulance.
Okay, you're
Fire
on
conferences and training,
fire.
year to date, 1192.50.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry, I was ambulance.
Yeah, that's fire. We were talking
5,000.
ambulance.
Seems high.
I believe I asked something similar, but again, I don't know what other people's recollection is.
Asking about ambulance training, I'll ask about fire.
And then the radios, aren't the radios on CIP too?
They're different things, all the replacements are there. This is batteries and maintaining basically the radios we already have, and CIP is purchasing, replacing.
We're $146 year to date out of the 7,500.
I remember he said that would all be spent by the end of the year.
I think those have been ordered and not arrived.
That's it for the last page.
Okay. Stephen or Thomas, do either of you have anything? Sorry, besides roads?
We don't like to talk about green bags.
Oh, God.
No, I don't have anything else specific. I do have a different not on the individual budget items, but on the fund balance review, but I don't know when it's good time is.
Stephen, do you have any other, or
I was gonna talk about revenues.
Well,
any other?
yeah, I wonder if we want to talk about the merit pool. We've got it in there at 6.5%. And that's, I know we talked about it and why we said it, but that's another area we can.
I was not looking at revisiting that.
Okay.
Same.
I agree, it's a large item, it's a large chunk. But I mean, if decreasing that is effectively asking everyone, all the employees to take a cut. If the price of electricity is going up, the price of oil is going up, the price of tea is going up. Decreasing that number to me feels
Yep.
like an unfair ask.
Nope, I get it.
Okay, so does it make sense to go to revenue, Ken, first before you, Thomas, or is your question?
I don't think we should ever come back to me.
Okay, let's go again. Okay,
Okay, in page 3 or
This one's a live spreadsheet, so I can change it.
oh, good, this is exciting.
on this page, well, page 4 on the new book, page 3 on the
Use the numbers.
okay. The land use change tax 3120.005. Year to date is 31,772. The estimate for this year is 30. Last year's actually was 51. So question should be raised with the,
Should we raise to what?
should we raise the 30?
Wait a minute, 51 was, oh yeah, that was 2021, okay.
It's 14.
39,804.
Feels a little scary to me.
Yeah, no question. It bounced well in 2020. Beginning of the pandemic, it really dropped. Say 35.
I think building will slow unless people are building and taking land out.
Yeah, it seems like we're on a slowing trend. I would not be in favor of raising it, but we're on line 3120 under revenue land use change tax. Ken was saying, raise the 30 to 35.
Yeah, just looking at year to date and looking at prior years.
On this one, the big settlement between Massachusetts and New Hampshire
That's flood control.
for the flood control, I know,
It's
so,
it's separate and it's already taken into account. We didn't get any more money than we were getting in rent.
from the settlement, from the big settlement,
Right.
The state's already been paying us.
for the increased amount. Because like 2 months ago, there was a big case, they redid the whole thing, and there was like an extra $50 million coming from Massachusetts to New Hampshire
But the state's already been paying that out.
for the higher amount, even though they just decided it like a month
I'm
ago.
sure the settlement was a higher.
I thought it was the same for us.
No, so there was like a new agreement like a month ago, that happened really recently, right?
Right,
And then they were gonna be paying an extra like huge amount of money.
but they hadn't been paying any.
And they hadn't been paying any and the state had been paying us regardless?
Correct.
Got it.
And we fought with the state about that for years to make sure that we got. what
Got
we
it.
were supposed to.
So, okay, cool. So, okay, got it. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Revenue?
You want to increase it to what? 35? Yeah.
And I said, that's scary.
But do we have an updated number on the year to date? From what's in the old book?
31,772.
Yeah,
Is that-
it did not change
That's up
in
to date.
October.
That is up to date. Okay.
And similarly,
that, sorry.
the yield tax, which also didn't change in October, is 28,024. You know, should we raise that from 25 to 30?
What was it? Do you know what it was in 2018? Is it easy? If it's not easy, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I can go like that, but I don't have it.
I think I can tell you for the wrong year. Yeah.
Nothing goes back to 19. Oh, you have your
Oh,
old book?
I do.
I left my home.
Accidentally. 31 of May.
It was 44 in 2019. which was
2018 was
last full
26.
year.
It was
Jumped around.
26 in 2018.
Yeah.
26.
And actually land use, the land use change tax was 13 grand in 2018 for another data point.
So, and unlike expense numbers, which regulate what you can expend, what actually comes in is going to be what actually comes in, no matter what you put in here.
Right.
Yeah, you know, what this ends up just showing is what we estimate the tax rate is going to end up
Mhm.
being. People
Right.
have to pay.
I feel like on this one, like on the expense side, I feel like it's better to be over rather than under. On this one, it feels like I'd way rather be under than over.
Right.
If
And the promise of the
if you way overestimate, then you're never gonna hit that tax rate
Mhm.
promised. You never not hit the rate that we've told people at town meeting.
Okay, I won't argue. Under the pilots, it's more a question about Kentucky Hydro. And the information you provided us, it seemed like they're underpaying the contract.
And have historically. My question was, is the year-to-date accurate given our settlement?
Yes, the others were all just billed, so they should be coming in, so that should be going
Oh,
on.
okay.
That is mostly the settlement.
Got it. And can you look at what the hydro people actually paid us in those last 19, 20, and 21? And rebuild them
Sure.
for what they didn't pay us? And adjust the 2022 bill,
Are they,
estimate of average for those 3 years?
how does the billing work in terms of when do we bill them, or do they just send us a check at some point during the year?
They generally send a check, but there should be a bill too that goes out, so I'll check on.
So the 40 43 or the 5,000 number. How did you derive that?
Based on what we've seen come in though. So we'll go back and take a look.
Okay, because I'm trying to picture the financials we saw. Their operating revenue was.
It was low in 2020, but it was in 2021, it was 150,000. So they should have paid us 7,500.
Right.
And in 19, it was 136,000.
Mhm.
It should have paid us 6,800.
So this isn't a budget question, it's more are they getting billed properly?
Right, we'll go check that.
Okay.
We've gone through and checked all the pilots very carefully. Make sure that we're billing correctly.
Okay. Then interest and penalties on taxes. Count 3190, 64,000, and I thought I had 65,900 from the October financials, but either way, is 67 a reasonable number, or should it be somewhat higher?
What did the October year-to-date bring it to again?
Well, this book, the new book shows 64, but when
I don't think the revenue year to dates, we didn't change those. So they should match whichever you have.
the October that you sent me today, Neil, was penalties and interest 3190. For year to date is 65,922.
So it's going to hit 67 for the year.
Well,
Pretty close.
we got 2 months left, so I assume it's going to go.
Yeah, but it doesn't go by month because
And it only increased by less than 1,000 between September, the September number and the October.
that mostly comes in during tax lien time when people pay the tax lien, and also because we deeded, we're not receiving interest on what we now own. It's offset by revenue and other ones.
Okay. Normally, we have an argument about motor vehicle, but I think your estimate is reasonable.
Probably live
Touche.
now I'm really uncomfortable.
You're going to get 100,000 reserve there. Licenses, permits, and fees from the town side. It's account 3290. We're already 14,445 versus an estimate for next year of 12,700. Should we be looking to increase the 12,700 somewhat?
Or extra dog licenses based on the fact that during COVID, they were done differently. And I'm not convinced that's going to carry over. I think that was a one time.
So you think going forward, it will be closer to 19 than what it was in 21?
Yes, I think the 12,700.
The penalties, as you mentioned, were quite a bit higher than budgeted for this year. So if you think that's a non-recurring thing, then I'd agree with you.
I'm not convinced it's a reoccurring thing.
Okay. Jumping to planning board fees. It's 3401. Again, looking at year to date, 6,200, estimate for next year, 7,000. Should the 7 be increased slightly?
It's 38 and 68.
Yeah, and
Right. Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I don't see that growing by a lot.
I'm not
Interest rate
thinking next
increases
year. Yeah, I think this is going to slow.
can't bring new development.
And we're only at the 62.
Mhm.
You want to talk about.
Let's add
permit
$3.
fees.
okay. Um, 3 down, building permit fees.
I do think that could come up a little bit. 48.
I'm totally convinced next year is going to match this year. We have 2 new houses today.
Let's raise the permit fees.
Actually, we did. So
Good.
that's probably having some of that.
How much we raise it?
Suggested 48.
Oh, ask how much we raise the permit.
Sorry. That I don't know.
Enough to make this 100,000?
No. But if it's 5%, I'll go with Stevens 48,000 number.
I think it was at least.
Yeah, I can live with 48 there. It's still, it's risky, but the fact that we got 2 new houses coming in is encouraging.
Okay, ambulance charges, that was increased on line 06. It was increased somewhat, but again, we're over that number year to date with 2 months to go.
Year to date through September or through October?
Through October, it's 331, 317.
That, I mean, this year looks to be an outlier.
Mhm.
Yeah, the related issue is Warner seems to be way down.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they've only paid half so far.
And the
They've been
time-
billed for the second one.
Oh,
So they
okay.
pay twice a year.
I feel better.
Yeah, so that we'll meet that.
You know, are there any of these that you feel uncomfortable with, like especially uncomfortable with? Are there any of these that you're like, if there's one of these that's gonna swing wildly, this is the one? You feel great about all these?
No, I've been through them all pretty careful. Not quite as carefully as Ken, I don't, but.
Well, Thomas, as you probably picked up from Budget Committee, I'm a little more optimistic about revenue than Neil is. And I appreciate, you've got to be conservative.
I just meant for my, yeah, I wasn't trying, I meant for my sake, I don't have a lot of experience with these, so I'm just curious which ones are the ones that swing wildly.
I would tend to estimate conservative, just because what we get is what we get.
Mhm.
And if we don't meet budget, it just means the tax rate's higher than we said it.
I mean, if it's 330 through the end of October. Don't have a problem bumping it up to 330 for next year, but I'd be hesitant to go higher. Just being overly aggressive.
That's fine with me.
330 with 20 again?
I'd rather keep
Ambulance.
320, but am I the only one? 'Cause we're already raising, I'd rather keep it at 320, but.
Yeah.
I seem to be more conservative than Ken, so. It might be in the minority. Because we're already raising it. And no other year even really comes very close.
What's up? I'm sorry.
Ambulance charges?
No, I was moving on to the next thing, but.
Oh.
I hadn't finished. That's 325.
Oh, 325, is that what we're doing? Is that what you're proposing? Okay. I mean, I feel better about that than 330.
Question was gonna be why the sewer user fee is so low for the year.
Wait,
Yeah,
which way?
The sewer user fees,
It may be that they just haven't made the transfer. That will equal. Because whatever we've expended out of the budget gets transferred back in.
and I assume this increase is 25% is because we raised the rate.
Yes, it's, that basically it basically covers the whole sewer budget. Plus, the only line that isn't in there for that we split half and half that isn't in the sewer budget is health insurance for the full-time employee.
Jeff, you jumped ahead of me. I was gonna.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I was gonna go back to ambulance intercept charge. 06-05. Year to date is 5775. We're estimating 5,000. And if you want to look at the prior years, in 21, nobody wanted to go in the ambulance if they could avoid it. Otherwise, it's been over 5,000. I'll be conservative and just suggest 6,000.
I don't like messing with any of the ambulance stuff. I'm just gonna say that, but it's me.
Before you tossed out a number, Ken, I was gonna say 55.
I'll grab it and call that a victory.
Master negotiator.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, Neil, you took care of the Webster transfer station reimbursements. And as well as commercial. So I don't think, I didn't have anything on relating to transfer station.
Can I ask about,
Do you think that number is gonna hit 145 this year? Sorry. Yeah,
Transfer station commercial.
yeah, I thought we were way down on that because we're not taking septage anymore, so the future doesn't look like 145.
So,
Well, you got 160 up there now.
And a note that the fees will increase.
Back in 21.
no, they were increased partway way through this year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think I might have gone too high here.
I wonder, I didn't question.
Thinking more like 125 or 120. If we get there, I mean, the fact that we're not taking the septic
Yeah,
in,
because that's changed dramatically. I think probably 20.
Is that year to date that's there? Is that?
It's accurate as of.
Yeah, 43.
Okay, yeah.
So
Sorry, Ken.
that's true, up back to zero. So what is the number?
120.
I think that's.
Have you been changing as we've gone along there?
Yes,
Not that one.
He just changed it
It's already
on the
changed.
computer.
Oh, it's not there, okay.
Yep.
Um, yeah. My next one's not until miscellaneous revenue, 250201, checking accounts.
Before we go down there, can I ask about the pay by bag revenue? So I not trying to throw the pot, honest question. Let's say, let's just say that the 3-year cycle of someone making a petition article to get rid of green buybacks comes up again.
yeah,
Pay by bags goes away.
Yeah.
That goes away.
no, well, it does after the next,
That's collected.
this is already collected.
Collected.
This is from last year.
This is,
Right.
this
We've already-
money being collected in 2020.
Got it. Great, cool. End of question. Thank you.
The one above that, the recycling revenue is maybe a little bit low. We're 55.
Yeah, they're coming in a little bit higher than. we
Yeah, the market's
expected.
recovered quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah,
And our recycling rate isn't dramatically higher, but the money we're getting for it has been higher. I wouldn't go crazy on it, but I might go to 60,000 because we're already at 56 for this year.
yeah, I think actually we could do that.
Okay, so my next one was checking account interest. Where year to date is 25,233. And if anything, interest rates are going to be going up.
It's true.
So you want to up that to 25?
Do 20.
Sure. Yes. That's all I had on revenue, and we end up getting a plus or minus.
We're up over last year, 46,197.
But we went down from the booklet.
Yeah. The last year's budgets were updated based on the tax rate set. So there was one big change in the comparisons, that's why the amount's higher. Room and meals actually, based on the added amount we're actually getting 521. Which is more than we had budgeted,
Was it 350?
but it's going back down next year. When I talked to DRA today, so that's why. Because in order to compare for the tax rate, we need to use the same numbers that were used to set the tax rate. So the estimated is about, it's about $28,000 more than.
Okay, no, I was looking at the estimate for 2023. The
Right.
total revenue,
It's about $28,000 more than the book.
more. I'm seeing 18,000 less.
Which book do you have, Ken?
I'm looking at the new book,
No, I don't have that one. I have the old one.
page 8,
You're looking at the total.
summary, or revenue total budget. 4761. 280. 3761.
Oh,
Okay.
So it's-
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so it's down from that.
Right.
You should have gone with my numbers.
But it was the. Everything we did was more than offset by transfer station commercial.
That's down 40,000 from where it was.
That's where it stands. So, but after all that, the amount to be raised by taxes changed by about $9,000.
So will we, other than maybe fine tuning the capital reserve, we're down to road and fund balance?
yeah, I think that's right.
I did have one other expense that I forgot to ask about. It's a small one. So don't get too excited.
Oh, I'm excited.
Okay, it's financial administration, the fixed asset expenses. 4150. Got it in there for $1,225.
Looking to see if we could bring that in-house.
Yeah,
I don't think that's been determined.
I preface it with, don't get excited.
Okay,
We needed something big, Stephen. Okay, so. We want to talk about. I saw you crunching numbers there. Do you have a plan?
No. I mean, sort of, I have more cohesive thoughts for
Okay,
sure.
Okay,
Can you go down to the bottom so we can see the. Where we're currently.
Pretty much the same.
So,
you want to share your thoughts? Nick?
I mean, just to keep it super simple. I think we should increase the shipping and paving budget, and then instead of doing a road project, increase the amount of money going into the capital reserve fund for roads. And maybe it's not 3 and get it to 1% that we're happy with. And the reason why I was getting kind of confused on the barn bond project, it's because effectively it's at 1.3 for the bond instead of a project cost. That 35% turns into 13%. And like all of a sudden that's like, great, fine, whatever. But and it's like a 35%, but if it's a 1.3 project now, and then we don't have a project next year we magically have 35% decrease in the budget, which is like, it's just a weird way of looking at it. That number is weird.
But if it was a bonded project, it would be in the revenue side and the expense side. So when it went away next year, it wouldn't have any
No, if it was
impact.
next year wouldn't have any impact. But this year, what I'm saying is, well, that
Next
30,
year wouldn't be, there'd be debt service on it.
okay, so if you make that 1.3 a bond, what happens to that 35%?
Yeah, I agree it goes down. But
It actually totally disappears because the
Right.
first payment.
it's in and out.
Right.
But then the
I-
payment comes next year.
I know. I'm just like, the argument of that 35% number is. I
You'll
think,
never get away with 35%. I'm certain of that.
no, I know,
Budget committee throw Ken out.
I think it's worth making an argument that we think the roads are underfunded, they need to be increased. The best way to do it is to, over the course of 5 years, increase the amount that's going to shimming and paving and increase the amount that's going into the capital reserve fund to get it to a.
How
point.
much do you want for each of those?
I mean, I think that I would want to do more in-depth study into what those numbers should be, but I would say probably on the order of. I mean, I honestly don't know, but at least 200 and maybe 400 to 500. Like basically 200 in the shipping and paving, 400 to 500 in the capital reserve. Like take what's sort of semi-planned capital reserve fund, move it up to actually paying for it now as opposed to maybe paying for it in 5 years. And then using that to pay for actual road, large scale projects, and then the shipping and paving to get to a place where it's more stable. And I don't think we should say those are the numbers now, but like more thought should be put into what those numbers would be. And yes, it would be a dramatic increase this year, but then it wouldn't be an increase next year. It would just be what we're doing. I'm also totally comfortable making that argument and having it voted down. Like I'm okay with that. I just think it's worth making the argument.
I don't disagree. It's worth making an argument for better roads. I think that is something that a lot of people would support.
You could put it in as an individual warrant article and have that discussion.
The question is, I mean, just at the number that let's say it's 600,000, that's a little less than half of what the 1.3 million is. So we'd still be looking at a 25-ish% increase in the tax rate. Excuse me, in the total spending. Like, because all you're doing is reducing that by 600,000.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Neil, do I recall that you've indicated that we're gonna be encumbering about 200,000 block grant for roads? And that's not part of the potential 600,000 fund balance?
No.
Okay. So we've got another 200,000 to bear in mind. You know, I certainly think it. Because of that 600,000, we can significantly increase the shimming and paving line. I don't know if we want to just stop with a significant increase to that at this point.
And not do Briar Hill individual article.
Well, we could do that as a bond, but it's only for a third or so of the Briar Hill itself.
That's what I'm trying to say though, is that like. I'd be much more in favor of saying this is going to the capital. It might not even pay for all of it, but it's going to the capital reserve because we're going to normalize. This is something we're spending money on. the 1.3 to Briar Hill is just saying, we're gonna deal with this one thing now.
Yep.
Which feels like a,
Small Band-Aid.
yeah,
Sure. Short-term fixed tool.
like I don't wanna have, I'd rather have one big argument than have the same argument every 3 years. Right.
We have it every year.
But. Yeah,
So you end up bonding every year if you call it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That just.
so we've had 2 bonds in the last, what, 5 years, 6 years?
And largely, after the next 2 years, that's what's left for bonds, road bonds. Everything else will be paid off.
So we do
Well, yeah, so we do sewer, yeah, which is another infrastructure.
septic. I mean, I like saying to the voters, you know, we need to be spending more on in our yearly budgets to support road work. I mean, that's my preference, just to do it that way, rather than, like you say, bond for one particular project because it's so bad. I just don't know. I don't know what the voters support.
So are you suggesting significantly increasing shimming and paving and then having a separate warrant article for X amount to the capital reserve for roads?
Yeah, along the lines that Thomas just suggested.
I think you're better off putting more into capital.
Yeah.
Putting the whole amount into capital reserve, which could be used for either, to get this Briar Hill project moving.
As opposed to increasing shimming and paving significantly.
Right, it's going up.
Because the capital reserve can be.
has
used
more
for anything.
flexibility.
It's going up 8, you have some to encumber to carry over. Plus the extra block grant, so next year we will have some more money in paving and shimming. And if you added everything to the capital reserve, then it moves towards Briar Hill, and then the year after, if you keep that amount basically stable. And then work on paving and shimming from there.
So do we already have a capital reserve fund established?
We do.
Yeah. So we don't need a warrant article? We just have to put in the budget?
Well, I think if you were gonna do that, we normally do all the money to capital reserve all in one.
Oh, okay.
thing.
That's it.
I think I would say
I remember that.
do everything except the road in that one, but do a separate one for the road so you can have this conversation
Yeah, that
and
makes
people can
sense.
really commit. On the other hand, people are pretty supportive of capital reserves, and you don't want to
So,
double it.
You don't want to blow the whole thing up.
Right,
Just
exactly.
conversation.
And then this discussion is important for voters to have.
But then in future years, that could then be part of.
Once it's passed once, yes.
so if, I don't know if you can humor me on your spreadsheet, Neil, or
I
not.
can.
If we took the road project out,
oh my God, makes me nervous.
So it's a different version.
yeah, I always had that problem. Like,
It's a different Excel
my
version.
version is the ABC and then the date. So I know what day I changed it on.
Yeah. All right, so
So if we take the road project out. And you can just put this number in there, just because this is just discussion. So if we put 500,000 into a capital reserve fund. And then we used 500,000 of the fund balance.
oh, sorry. Before.
I mean, you can put a negative in there and it, you know,
Please.
So we're still owing 12%.
Well, it's better than 35.
it's that barn bond.
And is it unwise to use 600 of the fund balance? I'm asking because I don't know. Do we usually use virtually all of it?
That would be a lot.
Okay.
And then the problem becomes next year, you've got to make up that 600. If
Right,
you happen to have,
okay.
I think it may go higher. I think you could easily use 5 because my sense is.
And so, take the 500,000 road project out, and what's the tax rate impact? Okay,
2, 3.
so then if this road 500,000 is a warrant article and we have the discussion. It passes, then we have a revolving fund going forward. And if it doesn't, the people have spoken, I suppose, except the people on Briar Hill.
Remember, we have the 200,000 also.
Right, but
Grant.
you know, we have $20 million worth of projects, 200,000 is a drop, a proverbial 1% drop in the budget. But yeah, 200,000.
This is a very almost low budget. And then if you have a warrant article, people decide.
But if we're talking about trying to normalize the budget. I mean, if we're increasing the money that's going to go into this road CRF, I feel like we're also tying ourselves to use a lot of fund balance every year.
What,
No,
is 6.5% tax impact. And what are the dollars we have?
Take, make the fund balance 400, see what happens.
So Steve, I disagree with that.
Yeah.
What I would say is that in years where the budget is coming under inflation, you don't use the fund balance. And in years that you're coming over inflation, you do use the fund balance. Like you use the fund balance up and down until you normalize everything out.
But I mean, I don't remember a time when we didn't dip into fund balance. Is that just because we've always been behind inflation?
Well, we've always tried to
Because
reduce the tax rate on behalf of the taxpayers.
Well, yeah, but
Well, it's also, if you have fund balance, you should use it.
well, yeah, but I mean, I worry that, you know, if you look at the history of
If it
our.
doesn't show up, your tax rate's gonna skyrocket.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that's why
we've always tried to leave.
No, right, so like, I'd be more in favor of a scenario. I'm not saying that we should use the fund balance, but like in ideal scenario is over a course of several years, we're increasing that number to get to where we want to be. So we do increase it, just maybe not all at
Increasing
once.
which number to it?
The CRF. And if it makes most sense because we have a pressing project now to increase it dramatically at the beginning as opposed to gradually over time, then it would make sense to use the fund balance to offset those initial first 3 years.
If we use 300,000 in fund balance, that brings us to about 6.5.
Right, but that's with no CRF money for the roads.
No, then that gives me an idea of how much potentially we could. Okay. So there's another 300,000 that we could. If we wanted to use all the fund balance, then we have 300,000 we could put into that CRF and still have a 6% increase. I'm uncomfortable using all the fund balance.
Wait, you are or not?
I am not.
Okay, good. So that's where I am too. Cute. So wait, under this, I'm losing track of what's happening for the roads with this approach.
Nothing.
No,
And so do we have like very basic question here, Briar Hill, do we have a sense of like how urgently that 1 mile needs to be redone?
It's pretty bad.
Is it the top of Briar Hill or is it the
It's the
hill?
bottom.
Yeah,
The
the fireman.
Like, what did, Dan said it takes like 4 times the amount of salt or something because of the way the road is so busted. Like it just takes more, they have to redo it like
It
5
puddles.
times more than,
Puddles and.
oh, right, that's what he was saying. Yeah.
They melt it.
So it's a money pit.
Either way.
Yeah, right. But one way seems way more wasteful.
I mean, another way that could happen is you bond Briar Hill and increase the CRF. And you offset the CRF by the fund balance. Which like, personally, I'd rather wait a year than continue down the bond road, but. Although
And if you're gonna bond, you almost need to
Bond now.
Yeah, I was wondering about
A
that.
third of it.
Right.
It just seems like you're better off waiting and doing the whole.
But the whole thing, Dan give us an amount for the whole thing, I forget.
It must be 4 million or something, right? Because he said it was over a million for 1 mile and it's 3 miles.
So it's just about 4 million without the top coat.
Yeah, but how much with the top, that's my question, not.
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought all in, it was like $6 million.
Yeah, that's.
If we use 500,000 of fund balance and we put into a reserve 200,000 for the road, does that give us about 6.5%?
it doesn't really get you anywhere.
Yeah, 200,000 is not,
It's kind of a waste.
So can we just break down the approaches here to keep it straight? So your one option, Thomas, I think this was from you. We don't do anything this year, like there's no bond for Briar Hill or anything. And you can put some chunk in CRF and offset that with the fund balance. Is that what you just said?
one more time.
So I'm just trying to keep our options straight. I guess I'll start with the bond option. So we deal with Briar Hill and do some, I don't know, it must be like a $4 million bond or something-ish around there. And take care of that and then separately put some money in the CRF and offset it with the fund balance, right? Isn't that one option? And then the other option, it seems like, is you take away the bond. And effectively, we don't do anything related to Briar Hill
well, but we put money in the CRF. to
Right,
be able
and you
to do
put-
Briar Hill,
eventually.
not as fast as the people would like it.
I think 500 is going in CRF is over. That's the number you put in, right?
It's a what?
So like, I think more research needs to be put into what number it should be. But by rough estimate, I think the CRF should end up at 800.
When?
Ideally now, but like over the course of 5 years. Or longer, like whatever time period we want to use. So we could start it at 300.
We had figured that, and 2 years ago when we did that, it was 750, which is why.
So I'm close. Yeah.
Further out,
Yeah.
and those numbers have changed. We
Changed,
haven't
right.
updated them, but that was, we did figure that.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not totally off. So,
I keep having fun.
so take,
Me too.
start at like a third of that. With the goal of increasing it over the span of 5 years, 6 years to where it should be. And so the CRF would be like. Not. But then we would need to do a bond for Briar Hill,
Because that puts Briar Hill.
because of the Briar Hill's way out. Yeah. And if we're already behind the ball on Briar Hill, so do the 1.3 on Briar Hill on a bond, because we're already way behind on the 8 ball on that one. And then
But that only does the base coat.
Yeah.
the 1.3, no, it does a restructure.
It's a
of the first
rebuild,
one, Rebuild of one.
but doesn't include
Only
top
the
coat.
base coat, not the finish coat.
So that has to be done in,
The next.
A year or 2 years.
then we got that CRF.
And that's only,
But I don't think it's enough. I don't think it'll
Well,
be
I
enough
agree. I
in 3
think,
years.
I think it should be, I think the CRF should be up at 750, like, that's what, it should be up at around that number, that's what you have.
But if we only bond 1.3 for Briar Hill now, and we don't have enough in the CRF to do the top coat,
Right,
we will have pissed away.
No, I agree with you, I agree.
So I'm saying, if we're gonna bond Briar Hill, we should bond whatever the total is, 3 or 4 million.
I agree.
Yeah,
I think,
I would agree.
let me say what I agree with. I think if we're gonna bond, it shouldn't be just for the first mile. I agree with Jeff. If we're gonna bond for Briar Hill, we should bond to do
4
the entire
1.5
thing,
million.
top coat included. And then also start putting more money into the CRF to build that up.
So bond the whole total, and then increase the CRF starting at 250 now, increasing to 750 over the course of 5 years?
I don't know what that increase is. I don't know what the steps are. But to me, it's either we put a whole bunch of money into the CRF to start introducing people to how much money we ought to be spending on roads, or we put less into the CRF and do the bond for Briar Hill.
Yep.
I don't know. Frankly, I don't know what's better, and it's gonna hurt either way.
2 years ago, CIP recommended putting more money into the capital reserve and not.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, you don't pay the transaction and the interest costs. I mean,
But the flip side of it though is that the construction costs are rising faster than the interest rates. So by saving money, we're actually losing.
well, the other flip side is that if you do a bond, it's one argument at 1 year and you get the money for Briar Hill at least. And if you do the CRF, we're potentially having
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
every year.
I would say like that number should be big enough where you're spending that entire amount every 2 years, not saving up money for 5 to 10 years and then spending on a
Okay.
project.
And that's where the more research comes in to know what that figure is over 2 years. Yeah.
So we are meeting next week.
No, we can do this real, we can do this real quick.
Thanks a lot, Thomas.
It's either, well, I don't know.
I think if you start the CRF at 250, you'll face arguments as it raises over you versus starting at a higher number. I'm not saying to go to 750, but 400 or 500, I think would, you start there and you only go up 100 grand. That's different than starting at 250 and go up 100 grand.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, I agree with what everybody's saying. My concern is if people are gonna see a tax rate increase of 10%, they're just gonna say, no,
I think that's okay.
it's okay.
Yes, I think it's totally okay to recommend.
If it's primarily related to the bond,
That's why I think
Separate.
Briar Hill or whatever should be separate.
right,
Yeah.
it would be a separate bond for a bigger amount, you know. Whether it makes sense to do it over 10 or 15 years, I don't know, because it's New England, the roads just heave. But it's gonna be a big number. I mean, that's, it's another 300, 400,000 debt service a year.
I think if we propose something that got voted down 90% to 10%, then we've done something wrong. But if we propose something that's well thought out and gets voted down 55 to 45, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
If it's a bond, it needs
60-40
this. And if it's.
Sorry, well, I mean,
I'm just saying.
Yeah, yeah.
And if it's a capital reserve, it only needs 50.
I just, I'm comfortable with something being defeated if it's well thought out, well presented, and well,
What are we more willing to have defeated, the big project for Briar Hill or trying to put more money in the CRF? I feel like.
I just have a process question, Neil. We can't amend individual line items, right? It's the total of the budget.
Budget wise, that's correct.
So from the floor, someone can say, I don't like the CRF, I want to reduce the budget by 350,000. But if they do that, we don't have to move that 350,000 from the CRF.
No, because the CRF is a separate warrant
Oh,
article.
that's right, it is.
And so that would
All
get
right.
amended by exactly which one it goes
Got
in. And it has to go in there. You
Okay.
can't move that around.
Got it.
That's why I would do that is if you were upping it as a separate warrant article. for
Yep.
that discussion, so that.
Steven, to your question, I think I would rather have an individual bond be defeated than, or an individual warrant article be defeated than the CRF be defeated. I think,
It's gonna be an individual warrant
Well,
article, either case.
I meant individual project be defeated.
Yeah.
I think I think it's more important to try to get to a normalized level of funding for the roads than it is to get an individual project passed.
Yeah, I think I agree. So one more time, Neil, if we got a 400 and 400,
So if you do it.
If you did the fund balance to 500. Like get it closer to 10.
which number?
Gets it below 10, the tax rate increase.
Who wants to present this budget?
And that doesn't even, that's not even doing separate bonds.
Thomas already volunteered to do the road.
Hey, man, I'll take it all. If everything goes, well,
that.
if everything goes well, they'll vote me out and I don't have to do it next year.
You're in for 2 years though.
Yeah.
Can they recall me?
No, you're in.
If we presented this and the 400,000 road project was defeated, what's the tax rate?
That's an under 3% increase. I think that's the easier way to present it. This, and then.
Yeah, I would
A
agree.
separate warrant article that
I would agree.
is going to take
Raise and appropriate.
and let the town decide.
Can you, what if you put that at 400,000, the fund balance use?
Probably even more reasonable.
I think that's more reasonable and then it gives us more flexibility of fund balance use and then in the future, and then also there's that extra 200K that we can use for road standard. And I personally like not factoring in the 200K for the road grant
Oh, agreed.
because that means we can just tackle things that need to be tackled.
Flexibility.
I would almost say put more money into shimming and paving there. Because I've talked about 6.5%. I think 6.5% bottom line increase is defensible.
But this doesn't yet have the, if you have a warrant article to put money into
The warrant articles are gonna jack
capital
that.
reserve, that would put it up. That's not included in here. So the talk was to present this as, and then people could decide with how much they want to increase.
Yeah. I mean, I hear you that it's probably easier to support if it's in the operating budget, but I think it's probably better to have it have a full discussion as a separate warrant article.
And
When we add in the warrant articles, we're gonna be at 10%.
Well, this is all the warrant articles,
except
except for whatever you do for roads.
Roads.
Which one bring it up to 10?
Everything else is in.
So doesn't that say that what's the increase there, 201?
280,000.
280? So we add 400,000 on top of that for the CRF,
Right.
then the budget increase is gonna be
10%.
Double digits.
12.5%, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it will. That's right. That's what it was a second ago. Yeah.
I'm okay with that approach as long as somebody else presents this budget, this warrant article.
And if we do a road bond, and if we do a bond for Briar Hill,
Either way.
yeah, no, well, they're gonna be two separate articles, but they're both gonna generate a huge conversation.
And are you thinking of doing both or just one of them?
But we're just talking one.
Do a 500,000. No, you still can't do Briar Hill 3 years. You can't even do 1 mile for 3 years.
Yeah,
You can do the work, I suppose you can do the work half mile,
Yeah,
you know, mobilization costs.
I was gonna say the more you
Right.
shorten that, the higher those costs go up.
But a $5 million bond becomes pretty expensive.
Even if you do it over 15 years, it's still over 350 grand a year. So another process question, when do we talk about other warrant articles?
Any warrant articles that are non-money. That's usually like January.
Okay,
Money ones are all.
Do you have a petition? Or-
they're actually shortening the term of select.
Yeah.
No, the green bag, setting the price of the green bags.
Mhm.
We either need to eliminate the program or we need to be able to adjust the price.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense to not,
Agreed, yeah.
we're losing money on
So
it.
that, those will be January, beginning of
Okay.
January. Looking at all we'll do a sample warrant.
So I'm going back to what we were just talking about. If we separate out the bond CRF, you have the sort of baseline 5% or whatever it was increase. But what, does that leave Public Works budget still like, I mean, it's still largely intact. It just means Briar Hill continues if it doesn't pass. Well, we'd have to put a bond in for Briar Hill, right?
They use their budget totally intact.
Okay.
8% at the moment.
It's up to 8%
increase in
Right.
paving and shipping.
So we still have to decide if we want to put some, we either need to like, yeah, we got to deal with Briar Hill or not deal with it, right? And if it's going to be at least 1.3 million,
For a mile.
For the 1 mile.
base coat.
that's for the redo, but not including the top coat.
Right.
He said it was a total rebuild. So,
But the risk is if we do the rebuild, but not the finish coat,
right, then just wait.
the road will disintegrate in
Right.
a very short period of time.
You can't do the finish coat until it's the entire road redone or just the.
No, you just
Yeah.
can't, you have to do it. It has to sit for 6 months or a
It's
year.
just a timing thing.
Yeah,
But if it goes through the winter,
But can the finish coat be part of this bond? Like, can the price?
right, that's what I'm thinking, just, yeah.
So it doesn't have to be 5. It could be,
Because we wouldn't have to, we'll
1.5.
just spend it.
So-
it could just be like 1.5.
So it's 1.3 to rebuild,
Sorry, go ahead.
it's 1.3 to rebuild. And then I don't know how much it costs to do the top coat
Yeah, we'll have to get that.
from, because then we could add that in and then you've taken care of 1 mile of Briar Hill. But it's the worst mile.
It's by far the worst one.
So
Is,
we would have,
Sorry, go
like, no, I was just trying to think through the bond situation. Basically, there's no other way to do Briar Hill in the next like year, right? Unless we do a bond. Is that correct? Or unless we
unless we have an
appropriate 1.3.
tax.
yeah,
Right,
yeah.
okay,
We could do the 1.3.
in our budget. So,
If we. Theoretically, if we did the bond and increased the CRF. Then the CRF should be able to cover the top coat. The cost of the top coat in like a year, right?
let's hope, I guess, but
Depends how much you put in the CRF.
It would, but then
They rent.
Then you're
it,
not-
but at
yeah.
least- But at least we're on the path of having annual amounts of money going towards road projects that we can hopefully increase to a normalized point over time.
Wouldn't you just be better off doing a bond at that point for the whole project,
Yeah,
that's,
including the top coat, and then it's
hmm,
significant.
Yeah.
That point.
I mean, that means that, so if we do the 400,000 to the CRF and then have a separate article for the bond. I mean, the bond wouldn't hit this year, it'd be next year, but next year would be
a new year.
big, would be, you know,
You're locking yourself into
30%,
well,
not 30, but I mean.
you're locking yourself into another 300,000 plus increase.
Correct,
wait, how much
over the next 15, 20 years or whatever.
percent?
No, 300,000.
But I don't think it makes sense to do Briar Hill piecemeal. I think we should either commit to fixing it or just put a ton of money into the CRF. I mean, I guess my question is if we don't do anything on Briar Hill for a number of years, I mean, I'm assuming the cost to do it will continue to go up. I mean, the road's already bad. I mean, and how much worse.
It's easier to tear up when it's already disintegrated.
Right, that's what I mean. It's already, I mean,
But I don't, it's a good, I mean, it's an interesting question. I don't have a great sense of how bad the rest of the 2 miles is compared to that 1 mile that Dan has
yeah,
flagged. I mean, maybe there's another couple of years. that-
Mud go.
There are places throughout the whole thing that are not great.
Yeah, the whole thing's got issues. That 1 mile at the end, if I had to like grade them between, I drive that whole length every single day. That 1 mile at the end, I would grade as like a 20% in terms of 1 to 100. And the rest of Briar Hill, I would say is probably like 50 to 60%. Does that sound fair?
Yeah.
Like that first section, you can go at a normal speed and you have to be careful because there's a couple of things you really got to watch out for. The last mile, you have to slow to like a walking pace. I don't think bikes can really even use it. You just get destroyed.
Well, even after Dan did what he did to it.
That part only goes to Broad Cove. That part's now great. It's already starting to deteriorate a little bit. You can see on the edges, it's starting to kind of crumble a little bit. Broad Cove to where like the Big Beaver Dam section is, that's still pretty rough.
The coat they put on is a really thin coat, so it's.
So to avoid the bond, but to attempt to like do Briar Hill in the next like 2 to 3 years, if we could push it off a little bit, then we could put more in the,
You got to put 700,000 in for 2 years.
right,
Which is what we should have been doing this whole time.
and then you wouldn't be doing it. If you did that, then you would be doing the work until year 3.
right, exactly. So you're pushing it off,
So by year 3, the cost of
probably-
that same mile
right?
is probably gone way
Yeah.
up.
0.6.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we wasted all this money on that crappy piece of road. Soaking up more salt or whatever it
Yeah,
does.
unless we're spending that amount of money every 3-ish years, doesn't make sense to not bond it. Because the price of the cost of building the road.
Yep.
Goes up so.
I mean, that is one of the more well-traveled roads in town.
Yeah. We do still have a couple culverts on Boundary. But really the culverts, that's it. We've gotten those done, so that's good.
What about bridges? Do we, I have this old sheet from Dan. It has Tyler Bridge, Boundary 1, Boundary 2, East Pennacook and Broad Cove. This is bridge and culvert.
So Tyler's done,
Yeah,
Can you,
got the 2 Boundary,
are those not yet done?
they're not
Okay,
yet done.
okay. East Pennacook, I have starting to rust, getting close to red.
Yeah, East Pennacook is the one temporary fix a few years ago,
Okay,
about quite a few years.
and then Broad Cove, is that,
There's a bridge on Broad Cove.
oh. Okay,
I thought that was fairly new. So there's a need for a second one.
Like maybe 30 years.
okay, sorry. So it doesn't seem like there's any super urgent culverts or bridges
Yeah,
that we know
and
of.
we are definitely working on grants for the Boundary ones. Hopefully we can get some.
Okay,
There's infrastructure money out there. We'll keep trying to get that.
does anyone feel strongly one way or the other about a bond for Briar Hill? Because I feel very in between right now.
I mean,
I just texted Dan and he's going to get me the finished coat number
Thank
in the
you.
next few minutes, he said. That might give us a little bit more clarity. I think your 4.3 million number is probably right. That you have from your notes.
Mhm. Well, it's 3.2 miles long. And I had 1.286 for that 1 mile.
Does that include the?
That
top?
does not include the top coat.
That's why we're getting that information.
So what can we do in the interim, Neil? Anything?
Got everything figured out.
Just it? Nothing else on the agenda?
It?
Non-publics, which is awesome. Oh, town administrator updates.
Oh, yeah, you did.
Did I make?
What about the whole bond and then 250 in the CRF? That equates to about the same amount as. It's about the same amount as what we're talking about for the CRF. And then if over the next 6 years, we increase from 250 to 600, we're getting close.
I just think starting at 250 and going up at that pace, 100,000 a year, basically,
Yeah.
is gonna be problematic.
I don't think it will.
When you hit, if you have a bond and you hit the interest and principal, that's on top of it.
Yeah,
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. It's
I agree, if we're gonna bond it, we should bond it. I mean, we shouldn't bond 1.3 million to just do the base coat on the first mile.
I'm comfortable having a relatively small amount as a starting point in the CRF. Because the numbers that are in here, once this gets going, once this plan gets started, people tend to follow it. And it's relatively well looked after, it's well thought out. And if it's increasing by $100,000 every year. If that's planned into the future, I don't think it'll be a problem.
my concern with doing less in the CRF is that in a year or two, there'll be another road project that's gonna be just as dire as Briar Hill. And we will not have built up the CRF to get ahead of it, and we'll be back to bonding. Or
No, I agree. I think we would. But I think that's okay until you keep building it up until the point where you're no longer,
but when that next project comes up, we never build it up because we always have to spend it down to zero. So we don't have to go back to the voters for the other bond.
I'm not convinced that we will ever get away from bonding
Yeah.
a reclaiming a road because of the size that we're at. If we had 200 miles of road,
Yeah.
we have enough complete reclaiming efforts every single year to be able to budget for that. But because we're relatively smaller, we might be at the point where we're not reclaiming something every year. We're doing it every 5 years or every 10 years, at which point it would then definitely make sense to bond it because you wouldn't want to be saving that money.
Right.
So then the amount that we would need in the CRF wouldn't be 700, it would be 500
A
or
lower
less.
amount, yeah.
It'd be a lower amount. And we would actually be planning on bonding every 5 to 10 years, but the amount we're bonding is less, the
Mhm.
frequency is less, because we're doing a better job.
Yeah.
Part of the issue for us is we've done road bonds like throughout the last 3 years, to the last 4 years.
Four,
Yeah.
five,
2
five, I think.
out of 5 years.
Last one was 20, and was it 18 and 20 that we did it? So I guess we're doing it every 2 years.
Are we right on schedule?
Well, because
Much
our
smaller
only,
numbers.
our other options are to do nothing and let the roads fall apart. Or you have, then every year we're faced with this like potential massive increase if we put it enough in the budget to deal with it. And so we just aren't left with a lot of good options, to state the obvious. And part of that is Department of Public Works historically was cut prior to all of our time.
And the cost to do the work.
And so we're not going to solve this overnight. So we've made some good positive steps. For example, that budget is not only not being cut, it's going up appropriately. And that's maybe the only good thing.
I think after listening to everybody, what I'm thinking is we put into the capital reserve 200,000 for the road. We take 500,000 out of fund balance and we bond.
The whole amount, the whole road.
Yes.
I think that's a good plan.
And I
200,
think,
Sierra,
I
five,
pulled those numbers, I
Fund
think getting us to about 6.5% tax.
and then bond. Okay.
I could probably do a lot of research to help refine those numbers, like that 200 seems right.
Okay, so the top coat,
500,000.
What's it right for?
Jeff has info.
No, so like, if
Jeff
we're
has
to,
top coat info.
You're really doing it backwards of what people can afford. It's not really based on.
well, like,
Gotta hear the breaking news.
the top coat per mile is about 130,000. Plus 30 to 40,000 for paved berms that need to be put in that area to keep that ponding from happening.
Is the 30 to 40 per mile as well?
It doesn't say, I think this is just for that first mile.
Okay.
But aren't the berms are in the
The redo one.
1.3
That's what I would think,
thing?
but maybe, okay. So somewhere around a little under 2.
1.5 to do that first mile.
Yeah.
So 3.2 miles is around 5 million. If we were to do the whole run.
Well, that's lower than I thought.
4.5 to 5.
And that's assuming that they need more berms.
Yeah.
Than the other miles.
So what did you say again, Ken? Do 200?
Neil's put the numbers up there. Bring it down to, it's putting 200,000 to the CRF. It's using 500,000 of fund balance. Bring it down to a tax impact of 6.31%.
And then that,
You're just
Then we
working
could-
back with that 6.5% budget increase you want.
Yes, exactly.
So also remember that next year, your bond payment's going to hit and you're going to have $500,000 potentially less in fund balance. Just,
No, that's.
you're talking $1 million increase right there.
So maybe we don't
Make a bond
spend,
payment. We can't.
Right, you have no option.
maybe we spend a little less from the fund balance.
like 400 on the fund balance. So on these,
Then it puts it up to 8%.
Close to 600.
which, to me, that's not crazy considering we
Yeah.
have a significant increase in this road CRF.
And we've also bumped up in the operating budget a little bit as well, which hopefully we can continue to carry over.
I also think it's totally still fair to take out the road project. So if there's a road bond and if there's a CRF, I think it's totally fair to have both of those be individual warrant.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I think that's the plan that we're all,
Right, but I'm saying in terms of that 8 point whatever percent. It's not,
So you would
we'd be
take,
making it very clear.
yeah, the 200 is gonna be a separate warrant article.
Yeah.
yeah,
And then the bond for Briar Hill, the first mile of Briar Hill is gonna be a separate bond.
First mile or whole road.
I don't know if we want to do a $5 million. That's pretty aggressive. And I'm not sure that the remainder of Briar Hill is
as
at that
bad,
level of
right.
urgency as some other roads. But since you're explaining it, you can go to 10 million.
I
if
mean,
you want.
you guys, I could just do the whole thing. You guys don't have to come.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Budget
I'm gonna
committee.
be out of town anyway. God.
Okay, I have sort of a basic question about the bond. If we were to do like 5 million and it was intended for Briar Hill, but then it turns out they could do 1 mile and it was okay. Is that money tied to that project or could it be?
We should make sure it's.
It depends on the wording of the warrant article.
Okay,
We're not-
Road improvements.
We're not appropriating the money. We're not doing the bond for Briar Hill. We're doing it for road improvements.
right, okay,
Yeah.
Like
okay,
last time we listed, this is what we expect.
Expect, okay.
Yeah, because otherwise you're tied.
Is
right.
it worth asking Dan? I don't know if it's tonight, but if it was worth asking Dan for an answer on the rest of Briar Hill in the same condition as that bad mile, so that,
Yeah,
you know, the cost for that bad mile
right,
is carried over for the whole, all of Briar Hill Road.
Well,
With some smaller,
if you're doing a rebuild,
you're doing a rebuild, doesn't matter, yeah.
He
you're
said
right.
it's 1.3 in 3 segments
Okay,
is what they.
so you're scraping it down to nothing, you're putting down new gravel,
but does
all
it,
new pavement.
And it should last
question.
forever.
It makes no sense, or it makes less sense, if we're gonna do a bond, does it make more sense? Money in years wise to do 5 million to cover maybe all of Briar Hill or some other project versus doing a little 1.5. Or whatever we need to cover that 1 mile. Do we already land on, we'd want to do something big enough?
Well, again, we're back to the impact of the debt service on tax rate. It's much less on a $1.5 million bond than it is on
Right.
a $5 million bond, but. You know,
I mean, I think we could, because you can amend the amount of the bond also. So if the voters aren't happy with doing the entire Briar Hill project in one bond, they can lower it to do the first mile.
I'm gonna call it the entire Briar Hill project.
Or, yeah, but I mean, when Thomas explains it, he's gonna say, it's this
He's
amount.
gonna say, the first mile of Briar Hill matters. We have other projects undefined.
I'm gonna say it's,
I
I'm
would think.
gonna say it's gonna be.
I don't know if undefined is gonna,
Not undefined, we'll get a list of the worst,
Yeah.
10 worst roads in town from Dan, and that'll be, $20 million.
Okay, so what do we need to finish tonight?
I think,
Scott, you go.
I think it should just be the 1.5 for the, I think it should be the 1 mile and 200,000. I think it's. I think it's worth researching whether or not we should be bonding reclaiming roads or whether we should be saving up for them. My gut is that it probably makes sense to be bonding them because of the size of our town
And because of how quickly the prices go up.
and because of how quickly the prices go. I think that we're in the segment of size where it makes sense to bond, not save, but it makes sense to put X amount into ongoing maintenance so that we can drag out those timeframes. I think that based on these numbers and how this is all shaking out and how much this is already increasing and all this stuff, it probably makes sense to do a smaller project rather than a larger. Let's meet the immediate need, make sure we're shoring up for the future, at least starting that process. And then,
So you want to change that label to roads CRF? Or is that not road project?
I can't because it's linked to
Okay.
something. I went to do that.
I don't want to pull anything up.
I don't want to fool with that yet. It's connected to the Warren article page, so.
I think it's 2 and 200, get as much of the road done as we can with 2.
if we do only $1.5 million bond for just that bad mile, I'd want to put more in the CRF.
Bad mile.
Because I just don't think that we're gonna need the money on hand to do the other parts of
But I think it's,
Briar Hill or whatever else.
I think it's worth looking into a little bit how that cycle actually happens. Because if right now we're thinking that we should be spending 750,000 total every year,
Mhm.
and we're deciding we're gonna be bonding the major aspects of those projects. If that's half those projects, then the total amount of our CRF at our maximum funding should be like 350.
Yeah.
So,
Well, if you're gonna bond all this projects, you don't need the CRF.
no, because you still need the CRF to do the maintenance over the 20 years, so that instead of reclaiming the maintenance.
Maintenance should be in your budget.
Right, but you're saying that it's better to put it instead of the budget, put it into the CRF so that we can use it for more flexible things.
Not maintenance. Maintenance should be in the budget.
Are you making a distinction between maintenance and
Road.
road repair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a difference between those.
So if you need to do like a top coat or a shimming and paving or like whatever, that's maintenance, then take it out of the CRF and put it into the
Budget.
shimming and paving budget.
Because I think this intent of the CRF is to rebuild roads. And
Yeah.
Right.
those bigger projects that aren't done on.
Yeah. Because then if the purpose of that amount of money is not to be doing major projects, but just to extend out the timeline between major projects, then we don't need nearly as much money going into those things. It doesn't need to be 400,000. It might only need to be 200.
That assumes you're bonding fairly often because we have all the projects backed up. That's the problem. They're not linear. They're
We're here now.
Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe someday the cost of salt and gas will go down dramatically and we can put more into redoing roads. So what else, what do we need to do tonight?
Adjourn? No.
I think we've
Nobody else.
hit everything else.
Okay,
So it's really thinking. What other information do you need to finalize? We need a bond amount.
I guess I'd be curious what people are comfortable with for a tax rate increase, taking the road bonding or whatever out of the picture.
Including the CRF?
Yeah.
Okay. So just the operating budget, basically.
Well, and CRF. All warrant articles other than a bond.
Oh, okay.
What's there is 8.09 right now, and, you know, I've said it comfortable with 6.5.
well, you're the one who has to present it, so I respect where your position is. It seems to me, given the world we live in, that like something closer to 7 or 8 would not be unreasonable, but I think shooting for 6.5 makes a lot of sense. I don't know that we actually got there though.
What's the amount we did for the warrant? The merit pool increase,
6.5.
6.5.
So right now, the operating budget, well, including sewer, is up 7.3. So you're not gonna come in at 6.5 and add money to the capital reserve.
Well, with the fund balance use and revenues are increasing.
So if you take out all that's in the road project is 200. That does get you down.
Yeah, I think when I said 200,000 in the there and 500 in fund balance use, which has its own risks for next year. the following.
Mhm.
With the bond.
Yeah, if we have.
Absolutely.
We got plenty of risk for next year already.
So wait, what's the 200? That's to go to the CRF?
Yeah.
Is that- So what if we just cut that, do the bond, and maybe reduce the fund balance from, what is it, 500 right now? Go down to 400?
It's 400.
Oh, it's 400, okay. So that's not super aggressive. Right?
It might make sense to hold fund balance at 400.
Yeah, okay. What happens when if you take away the 200, we drop down to like 5% or something? Okay, what if you do 100?
Have to make a difference.
All right,
It's 100, I definitely add it to the budget.
I see, yeah, okay.
Which would be an easier sell, I think.
Yeah.
If we put something into the pay by bag special revenue, that doesn't matter, that just washes up top.
Right, doesn't matter. Plus you're spending rental fund too, those are just one, those are from other funds.
So quickly on the CRF point, you were saying, Neil, if it's in the CRF, or basically if we want to use the money for like maintenance and shimming and paving, it should be in the budget, not in the CRF. So what are we doing? What's our goal with doing like 200 grand at CRF? Just to build up over time,
Build up a repair budget.
right? Wait,
But
repair,
I think that was.
Should be operating.
TRF was kind of before the bond.
right?
Yeah.
Well, so I'm wondering, does it make sense to just drop the CRF piece, go with the bond and potentially add to shimming and paving or leave it as it is?
Sounds like at this point, that's kind of.
Would you add, would the addition to shimming and paving be 100,000 or would it be a different figure?
What's the number now? For shimming and paving?
420 something.
420.
So I'm trying to come up with. That's some actual estimates.
Mhm.
There's a couple studies from Maryland and New York. And outside of the major projects, they have about $80,000 per mile over 25 years. So if you did that out over the 50 miles, you get to $160,000.
That's not even close. We just heard of top coats, 100,000 per mile. We should be doing 6 miles of top coat a year,
Every year.
So every 10 years.
Mhm.
every 10 years, on average. Some roads are a little more. some
So
are a
that,
little
that
less.
prevents the need to rebuild by doing a new.
So you're saying we should be doing $600,000 of maintenance a year?
Mhm.
So. In this,
Actually, 750, right? 125 a mile for top coat.
so the current CIP plan, their estimated 750 doesn't even include major rehabilitation every 25 years.
No, that is for major rehabilitation.
On top of the,
Right.
On top of the operating budget.
Operating budget.
Because
which
CIP
is-
doesn't look at maintenance.
So we're low on operating.
what if we increased shimming and paving to 600,000?
Oh, right, no, because we already have,
From
We already have 400.
we already have 400, right?
We're talking about here adding 100,000 to it, so I'm
That's
saying
what I'm
adding
So that's, I
180,000.
was gonna say at 80. Make it
Make
to
it
5.
500.
Yeah,
I mean, last year's 380, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's a 33%, 30%.
no, but I mean, it just, yeah.
There's only so much we can bite off in a year.
Yeah.
Hopefully inflation doesn't take it all. That's good.
And if you,
I worry that we're never gonna get ahead of the projects. And I know you understand, but I mean, that's, yeah,
then you're back to
back to bonding.
you're back to the 9 to 10%
we're-
increase. Yeah, if you push it that much.
This year we budgeted 389. for paving and shipping.
22. And it was going up to 420.
420.
420.
Is the 8% increase.
Yeah,
So if we take it from 390 to 500. That's essentially an $80,000 increase over what our current budget is. You know, if you change that 100 to 80,000, we'll at least see the impact. Give that 100,000 there for the road project.
Yeah,
Just change it to 80 for a second, just to know the number.
which gets to the 6% plus the bond, and that's using 400,000.
what, I mean, I don't know how to do the math. What would we need to increase that 82 so that the overall tax impact is about 6.5,
120.
120?
6.6.
That's pretty close. So I missed, what would shimming and paving be
So
then?
we were talking about just this year, you do bond, instead of putting a smallish amount into CRF, you just up the shimming and paving.
From
Budget.
420 to 530 now.
And then bond, Briar Hill. and
On all of Briar Hill.
Now we're talking about the mile. We're still sort of torn on the
Oh,
bond.
I'm sorry, it said 5 up there.
This-
That's why
yeah.
I thought we were
Okay.
doing all the.
Well, maybe. I don't think we fully landed. but-
I don't think that decision is.
Yeah.
So we down to just that one question, how much to bond?
I think
I
so.
think probably.
Okay, that's progress. So I'll go to the.
Go to the bathroom again, yeah.
Yeah, because if the purpose of that is to keep doing, to increase the ongoing maintenance, to separate out the major projects, then it makes sense to put in the budget on Sierra.
Cool.
Great.
Okay. So. What else?
$1 million or 5 million would be about how much a year in interest and principal?
How many years? 10 years? Well, it'll be 500,000
Plus interest.
plus interest.
Okay.
A lot.
So maybe,
Too much is the answer.
so how about,
Yes.
how about we do the, like,
You can get to maybe 2 million. Go past 2 million, it's gonna be a big number. Even at 2 million, you're at 240, 250 a year.
so maybe somebody said it over here, like the urgent need is just getting that bad mile done. And so we're not looking at 5 million, we're looking at like,
The issue is we're gonna be paying on it for 10 years, we're gonna have some other road that needs to be done the next.
right,
Yeah, but
We have some
I think that's fine.
coming down.
I think that's fine. I mean, it's like, we're deciding that because of the size and the rate that we need to be maintaining the roads, it makes more sense to bond it and pay the interest rather than save for it and lose the inflation. And so that's like, that's fine. Like, yeah, there's another one coming up in 3 years, but that's okay. That's how that's the structure. As long as we're putting, to me, the bigger important part is we're using money to maintain the roads, to stretch out those projects as far as possible.
yeah.
Because we have to pay for the big projects one way or the other.
I'm okay. I mean, I would prefer to bond a higher amount, but I'm okay with bonding less. But I ideally would like more money going into either the CRF or the shimming and paving line in the operating budget.
So we agree on those two.
I know, but they're in my mind, they're linked.
Go back.
I would,
But
Yes, they are.
I would be supportive of a little more in shimming and paving if we do the lower bond amount, but I don't feel super strongly.
You know, 2027, our bond payments dropped 250,000. They dropped
A long way from here to there.
Yeah, it
What's
is.
what happens between now and then?
They dropped slowly. Almost insignificant. Well, 23 to 24 dropped 60,000. But then only 4. And then beginning in 26, we only have the the road bond with the fire station refinance. 26, and then in 27, it's just the new road bond.
And that comes off in 32.
And that goes
2037.
up, yeah. So the bond amount, it sounded like you were at the lower, 2.5.
If we ask Dan what he could do with, say, 2 million,
You can do Briar Hill and another $500,000 worth of projects.
I think you'd probably say he'd go as far down Briar Hill as he could.
That's probably the best way to go. It's probably the most cost.
So 2 million, that covers the replacing all of Briar Hill plus the top coat, plus the pavement for berms and a little bit of wiggle room.
We need to
Another
make sure-
quarter of a mile.
we need to make sure the distance that's done, we still have money for the top coat.
Right. So if it was 130,000 per mile for the top coat,
130,000 per mile.
isn't that what you said? Yeah. So,
30 to 40,000 for berms.
right,
well, today costs. not-
right. So
2 years
maybe we
from now
do
costs.
2 million to
Yeah.
get that done.
And then, I mean, worst case scenario, if it increases dramatically, at least we've increased the shimming paving budget by
That's right.
money. Theoretically, we could use that if we need to.
And right now we have 110 going. An additional 110 going.
In the shimming and paving.
So we're going to 530.
To 530.
Daniel, be
That's
okay.
getting that up closer to where it needs to be.
Mhm.
sure.
So you're saying we're done?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You mean?
Yeah.
I think that's what.
I think you're done.
I feel good about it.
What do you?
Could
how do
we,
you feel about it, Ken?
The
You got-
valuation that you're using, Would you be comfortable if we increase that a little bit?
No.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about that? Not to,
We came in under this year.
Yeah.
That's what
For a
happens.
unique reason.
not trying to, again,
Uh,
so on your, so when you've been talking about a 6.5% increase, you've been looking at tax impact, not grand totals.
Correct.
Is the reason for that because the tax impact currently includes increased number of people living in town, so the tax impacts.
Projected increase in total value.
No, but see, that's a problem though, because if no one moves into town and you look at total increase in valuation, then the 6.5% isn't the increase that I'm paying. It's just a random increase in the valuation of town, whereas the grand total is the increase that I'm paying. But if the tax impact is not, if that valuation increase is because of new houses being built, then it's a change of how much I'm paying versus.
which it is.
Which it is, except for reevaluation years, in which case that entire thing is thrown up.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's
Okay.
a question there.
Well, is there a different reason why you're using tax impacts as opposed to grand totals when you're trying to target six?
Because that's what sales tax.
Well,
Oh, because that's what people pay,
yeah,
actual pay.
Yeah.
And the only difference between those two is this estimated
Growth in
change in
valuation.
valuation. That's the only,
Except in reevaluation years. So in reevaluation years, you would be targeting the grand total, not the tax impact.
It's a tax.
no, you'd estimate using your current valuation.
Not the reevaluation.
You're not gonna have any.
compare apples.
But then in the next year, then you're screwed again.
No, you're always
Uh,
trying to
No,
compare.
because then you already know what it was.
Right, so when they revalue the town.
Yeah.
It's gonna go to, make up another 880 million.
Yeah.
The tax rate is gonna go down, because right now it's based on 794 million.
But in that year, you're comparing it to the old valuation, not. Like,
Right, but see for,
Taxes are
so
zero.
in 2024, it's gonna go up.
unless people move to town.
So when we do the 2024 budget, we're gonna do it just like this, the 2023 number, probably adjusted, whatever.
Yeah.
And that will be what's
Yes.
presented, because we have no clue at that time what the new one will be. But then for the 2025 budget, you're using the actual from.
The actual one from the last year,
from
plus your projected change.
2024,
Yeah,
so
okay.
you'll know what that is by then.
And is that revalue year when you can replenish your fund balance because you don't have a good sort of, if the values increase, you get more tax revenues
Yeah,
unexpectedly, then you've exceeded
yeah,
your.
it's easier.
So like
You shouldn't get dramatically more tax revenue.
if next year,
The amount of tax revenue is driven by that top line that Thomas is asking.
so
5 point, whatever.
the specific way that shakes out is say next year's a tax reevaluation year, evaluation year. So we have 707 last year and projected 753 next year. And then we have a reevaluation. The number that we replace for the 707 isn't going to be 753. It's going to be whatever it shook out in the valuation.
Five.
And then we're comparing our next year to that number.
Yeah.
So that great, cool. Yeah.
So right now, the proposal for our tax rate this current year is 707. Well, 5 years ago, it was 736. So, cool, for example. And
That
then it
makes-
dropped to 5 something.
Makes ton of sense. Thank you.
So,
Motion adjourned.
yeah,
I want to ask Ken if you're comfortable with this iteration of.
Yes, but somebody else will be presenting the bond.
Right.
I mean, I'll present it.
Up to the mic, young man. It's your turn.
Yeah.
You're gonna get a new suit.
No.
okay, so can you? Okay, so Ken, you, okay,
The best.
ish,
Yes,
For budget committee purposes.
Yeah.
we have to still have the CRF.
Right,
I think
right.
we're pretty much there, but there are some questions.
We're not doing CRF.
and then, do we need to meet Monday?
Because
We
the
don't.
Probably
CIP is not.
Right,
You're not gonna have it,
Well, nothing-
nothing new you need by then.
okay,
We probably need to add something for meals for town Yeah.
Yes.
Considering how long we're going. to
Yeah.
be there.
Yeah, for sure.
That's right. We should-
Someone's gonna ask for a written ballot. for
Or the Girl Scout.
We haven't even talked about classic.
My first year was in.
That's a January.
I didn't know I was supposed to arrange for the food.
Oh,
So
you are
all the
so
only
popular.
food there was Girl Scout cookies.
Girl Scouts are.
You notice we've had food every other year since.
Okay, so we don't need to meet Monday.
Basically, this is kind of where you're at, unless there's changes, so we can be,
Yeah.
I can begin prepping stuff for the.
Okay. Good work, everybody.
Yes.
It's been a long, interesting journey. So far.
Motion adjourned.
Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.